evening. I am Kim Melnick, Vice Chair of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia, filling in for Carolyn Rye this evening as she is out of town. And I hereby call this meeting to order at 6:00 p.m. on this 22nd day of November. Thank you to those who have joined us in person and those online. Madam Clerk, will you please announce those school board members in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Present in school board chambers are Vice Chair Melnick, Ms. Felton, Ms. Holtz, Ms. Hughes, Ms. Manning, Ms. Owens, Ms. Riggs, and Ms. Weems. And currently attending via Zoom is Ms. Anderson.
Okay, excellent. If you would please join me in a moment of silence. And please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, the school board has the pleasure of recognizing division students and staff who have been awarded or recognized during state, multi-state, or national competitions or events. Cox High School, state champion golf.
Our first honoree this evening is a Cox High School junior who was recognized as a state champion in golf. Please welcome Josh Haggerty. Okay, Josh is not here, but hopefully he's watching online. Josh recently shot a tournament low 2 under par 68 at Heritage Oaks Golf Course in Harrisonburg, Virginia, to secure his second state championship in less than 6 months. According to his coach, Josh is a tremendously gifted two-sport student athlete. As a sophomore at Cox High School this past spring, he led the varsity boys soccer team to a Conference 5 state championship. And now he is a VHSL golf first place champion. Congratulations, Josh. We're proud of you.
This next one is near and dear because this honoree, like me, grew up in the Optimist Club. Our next honoree this evening is a Tallwood High School teacher who is recognized as the Virginia Art Education Association Secondary Art Teacher of the Year. Please welcome Susan Schutte. This award focuses attention on exemplary art educators, quality art education, and increased public awareness of the importance of quality art education. Ms. Schutte has been a member of the Virginia and National Art Education Associations since 2009. Since then, she has served the VAEA as a conference presenter, member of the Conference Planning Committee, and as a conference surfboard painting volunteer. Here in Virginia Beach, Ms. Schutte has been a Vibe Creative District mural project volunteer, collaborated on mural paintings with the police department, served on the high school curriculum committee for art, and volunteered to be a teaching artist exhibition participant. In addition, Ms. Schutte was Tallwood High School's 2021 Teacher of the Year. Congratulations, Ms. Schutte. We are proud of you.
The Virginia Art Education Association Retired Teachers of the Year. Our next honoree this evening is a former Christopher Farms Elementary School teacher who was recently recognized as the Virginia Art Education Association Retired Teacher of the Year. Please welcome Sheila Escada. Although retired, you would never know it, as Mrs. Escada continues to be a key contributor to our school division. She is a role model for art teachers on what it means to be committed to her craft and profession. Here are some of those examples. She has 44-plus years of teaching art and is the current matriarch of Virginia Beach City Public Schools Visual Arts. She was recognized as Teacher of the Year at 2 schools during her career. She has been substitute teaching in our division for 3 years, taught 1 day a week at Centerville Elementary. She is a current member of VBCPS Winter Art Show Committee and Teaching Artist Exhibition Committee. She served on the VAEA Conference Planning Committee held in Virginia Beach last year. When Mrs. Escada does decide to officially retire, her footprint will be large and wide. Her past and current contributions are cherished by the Visual Arts Department, and it's fantastic to see that she has been honored as the VAEA Retired Teacher of the Year. Congratulations. We are so proud of you.
And our next honoree this evening has been tapped for the State 2022 VAEA Distinguished Service Within the Profession Award. Please welcome Chris J. Bruner. Mr. Bruner was honored for his career-long contribution for our division, the region, and the state. Chris served as a visual art teacher at Luxford Elementary School, Older Nation Center Gifted Art Program, and the Visual and Performing Arts Academy from 1992 to 2008. His administration experience in the arts include 5 years as the coordinator for Visual and Performing Arts Academy at Salem High School, and he has been our division virtual art coordinator for the past 4+ years. Additionally, Mr. Bruner served on the 2020 VDOE Curriculum Writing Committee for high school art and was recently acknowledged at the 2020 and 2021 VAEA Tidewater Administrator of the Year. Mr. Bruner states that he is extremely grateful for all the opportunities that have been presented to him throughout the years, and that he has been honored to serve the students, teachers, and families in our division, region, and state. Congratulations, Mr. Bruner. We are proud of you. Thank you. This conclude our recognitions for the evening. Congratulations to all of the recipients.
So just a point, before you leave, Mr. Buhner, before you leave?
Yes.
Sorry, just one quick final note to that. He has announced his retirement. We want to thank you for your service to Virginia Beach. Congratulations, sir.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, number 8 on our agenda, the adoption of the agenda. Are there any modifications to the agenda as presented? All right, hearing none, I call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Motion, Mrs. Manning, second, Mrs. Holtz. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Please raise your hands.
Ms. Anderson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We have 8 votes, so the motion did pass. We have 9 votes. The motion did pass.
Okay, superintendent's report. Dr. Spence, we look forward to your report.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. Here are a few items of interest for you and our families to know this evening. First, more than 200 parents and students attended the first ever Deaf Night at School at Corporate Landing Middle last month. This event raised awareness about deaf and hard of hearing resources and encouraged students to consider careers in related fields. Among the several groups that participated were the Jefferson Lab, the Virginia Department of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and the Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. Volunteers from the National Junior Honor Society helped with the setup. Britta Hampton, who chairs the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program in Virginia Beach, hopes to organize similar events this spring and next fall. So here is some out of this world news. Lansdowne High School could have student designed products and technologies sent to the International Space Station. The HUNCH program, which stands for High School Students United with NASA to Create Hardware, challenges students to solve real client needs, and NASA recently selected Lansdowne to be one of a limited number of schools participating in this program. Students there will work to develop 21st century skills through project-based learning. For example, culinary students will be researching and cooking up dishes for space station astronauts. Biomedical students will design medical devices for use in spaceflight. Young designers will produce scalable prototypes for manufacturing in space, and communication students will be producing videos during a visit to NASA Langley Research Center. We are currently among 12 school divisions in Virginia participating in this program, but I have a hunch that we will eventually see our students' work circling around the planet in the not too distant future. Next, the Office of Family and Community Engagement hosted the Restock and Roll Drive-Through School Supply Giveaway on November 16th, and more than 300 families were there to receive support. We know there is often an enormous amount of community support for students at the beginning of the school year, but now in its second year, the Restock and Roll event helps families during the gap between the opening of schools and the holiday season. In addition to receiving school supplies, fresh produce, and non-perishable food, families also were able to stock up on warm weather clothing from our My Friend's Closet outreach. Verizon was there to help those who qualify for free Wi-Fi access, and we also provided information about our family voice groups. A special thanks goes to VB Schools, Partners in Education, the Salvation Army, Coastal Edge, and the Virginia Beach Education Foundation's Beach Bags program, as well as the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia and the Eastern Shore for making this event a huge success. I'd like to share a short video with you that the Army Corps of Engineers recently posted on its social media about our students' ongoing restoration work at Thalia Creek. You may remember that Princess Anne High School students helped to replace invasive species with native marsh grass in this Lynnhaven River tributary. So let's watch this.
Biologists with the Corps of Engineers, you get to do a lot of neat projects like this. We're out at the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration Project. This is the Phase 1 wetlands portion of that project at Princess Anne High School. This site used to be full of Phragmites australis, which is an invasive reed that is an undesirable plant and not good for habitat. So we graded all of that out of here and backfilled it with sand to the appropriate elevation and planted all of this Spartina alterniflora, this marsh grass that you see me standing in. This is all part of a major project that is designed to restore waters and wetlands of the Chesapeake Bay. These marshes are basically nurseries for fisheries and for even the seafood industry. Thalia Creek is, of course, a tributary to the Lynnhaven River, and the Lynnhaven River is a tributary to the Chesapeake Bay, a nationally recognized estuary that has a national law protecting it. And so that just makes this all the more significant because this is part of that entire watershed. And then just being able to track the success of it is amazing. I love working for the Corps of Engineers because I've always loved environmental causes and protection. It's cool to be a part of something so rewarding. And the other thing about Spartina is it secretes salt from the leaves. That's why it's able to grow in the marsh.
This year, students will and are using the Army Corps of Engineers wetland site to investigate the overarching question, how can the health of a wetland be evaluated? One day earlier this month, IB juniors designed their investigations, performed labs, analyzed data, and formed conclusions, which they then presented to a group of judges. And our AP environmental students are also conducting water quality sampling at Thalia Creek. So it's exciting to see our young scientists studying ways to improve the health of our waterways. And then finally, if you and your families are visiting Holiday Lights at the beach this season, we'd like to ask you to please consider walking a couple blocks beyond the official route and taking notice of this light display outside of the Virginia Beach Surf and Rescue Museum on 24th Street in the boardwalk. Students in our environmental studies program designed a renewable energy power station that lights up this display. The same power station provided energy for a concert outside the museum on November 17th that was part of a preview night for bicyclists on the boardwalk. The power station's wind turbine was provided by Dominion Energy. When spectators see this display and hear the story behind it, it's a wonderful way to demonstrate what our students are studying about the future of energy production. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. Item 10 on our agenda is the approval of the November 9th, 2022 regular school board meeting minutes. Are there any modifications to the November 9th regular school board meeting minutes as presented? Okay, hearing none, I call for a motion to approve the November 9th, 2022 minutes as presented. All right, motion by Mrs. Hughes, second by Mrs. Holtz. Any discussion? All in favor? Raise hand.
Miss Anderson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Miss Franklin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair, we have 10 ayes. The motion did pass.
Thank you. The school board will now hear public comments on matters relevant to pre-K through 12 public education in Virginia Beach and the business of the school board and the school division from citizens and delegations who signed up with the school board clerk prior to noon today. Speakers are responsible for being in chambers or online when they are called to speak. If a speaker is not present when called to speak or is not online or unable to unmute when called to speak, the school board, at its sole discretion, may allow the speaker to speak at the end of the public comment session. The school board also invites the public to submit comments through our group email account, which can be found on our website. And with that, Madam Clerk, please introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. First, we have Alex Estrote, Savannah Newell, and then Ari Benjamin Serja.
Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. I am here along with many of my peers to speak out against the Virginia Department of Education's proposed model policies on transgender students again. During previous meetings, we have made our case as to why the dead naming and misgendering of trans students is immoral, and we will continue to support that assertion today. Today, I want to highlight the effect this policy will have on teachers, counselors, and students. As a result of this policy, teachers will be forced to dead name and misgender their students. This will cause student-teacher relationships to be strained and force teachers to choose between respecting the basic rights of their students or following the mandates of the Virginia Department of Education. This policy will force students to choose between living their lives under their true identities in school or hiding their true selves from the world in order to prevent a possible detriment to their home lives. And this policy will force counselors to choose between turning away students who need their help with the battles that they are facing or risking being fired or punished as a result of the Virginia Department of Education's model policies. These are choices nobody should have to face. This board has the power to assure that no one in a Virginia Beach public school has to make any of these choices. In the midst of a period where mental health amongst teenagers is at an all-time low and teacher shortages are at an all-time high, these policies will ruin the integrity of our school system, resulting in higher rates of depression amongst our students and more teachers and counselors being ready to leave our schools. We want to assure that all students, teachers, and counselors feel safe in our schools. So what exactly do we want this board to do? Well, we want this board to continue to use its current policy on transgender students that has shown good results and has led to a cultivating environment for our trans and non-binary students thus far. We want this board to refuse to enact the forced dead naming and misgendering these model policies would require. And we want this board to assure that counseling services are available to every student who wants them. This past election was largely focused on the idea of putting students first, and I am asking this board to truly put its students first and protect our trans and non-binary students, provide them with the nurturing environment that they deserve. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Savannah Newell, then Ari Benjamin Serja, and then Jay Runyon.
Welcome, Savannah.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. As many of you are now aware, my name is Savannah Newell, and I am a student at First Colonial High. I have spoken to you multiple times that without advocacy, vulnerable people have no power and will be invisible. I have lent my voice to the vulnerable transgender and non-binary students and will now lend my voice to the vulnerable VPCPS faculty and staff. The proposed model policies force faculty to out their students to their families, regardless of safety. This policy is, in simple terms, unlawful and immoral for students and faculty alike. VP CPS faculty should not be forced to choose between the trust of their students and the approval of the state. And if forced to make the choice, teachers would undoubtedly transfer, retire, or flat out quit in order to avoid putting their students, their children, at risk. There's already a teacher shortage all over the nation. Our city is no different. With the newer generation of teachers being opposed to this policy, one must consider the risk of implementing a policy that would turn away future teachers rather than providing the open environment they seek. As someone with close ties to many members of the VPCPS faculty, their personal morals should not be compromised due to an overarching government policy. It has always been teachers' discretion in terms of the usage of pronouns. Why are we changing that now? Why are we allowing the state to tighten the leash around our teachers, making it almost impossible to focus on the most important tasks they face, educating and building trust with their students? Building trust is something that our teachers have worked endlessly on. You have seen teachers talk about the heartbreak they faced when their students felt as though they could no longer trust them. One of the many perks of being a teacher is building a relationship founded on trust with your students. When you take away the trust, you take away that relationship. For many, this relationship is what keeps them active in school and provides them with the safety that many transgender and non-binary students lack. Please, do not force our teachers to make the difficult decision between breaking their students' trust and losing their job. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ari Benjamin Serja, Jay Runyon, and then Alexa Hernandez.
Welcome, Ari.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Ari Serja, and I'm here to speak about the Virginia Department of Education's recent model policies about transgender students. A simple search of Virginia's Beach City Public Schools leads to its website. This website is loaded with images of the future generations in their classes, doing recreational activities outside, but most importantly, interacting amongst their peers in a nurturing environment. However, there is a common theme, and it's that the students, teachers, and faculty all do it with a smile on their faces. More importantly, the quote that is brandished on the website gives an insight into the values and principles that this school board seeks to uphold. It reads, "Put students first, seek growth, be open to change, do great work together, and value differences." Thus, the model policies proposed by the VDOE cannot line up with the values that VBCPS promotes and stands for daily. Providing context for the board today, the Human Rights Campaign saw a record of 50 fatalities in the year 2021 that were against transgender and non-conforming people. By allowing the policies here before us to become set in stone, it encourages the very thing a school shouldn't be, an unsafe environment that doesn't put the well-being of the student at the forefront. Equally important, it hinders the potential progress of future generations and societies by not only allowing for discriminatory thoughts and ideologies, but in turn encouraging them during the formative years of a student's life. Beyond just the direct effects on students, consider the burden you're placing upon teachers. Imagine their thoughts and feelings as in addition to the massive workload, they are now faced with not a choice, but a state-outlined burden that could potentially harm the well-being of one of their students by outing that student and leaving for an unpredictable future based on whether or not their parents are accepting of their lifestyle choices. This could be very well the reality of many teachers throughout the state, as these policies paint a grim picture for LGBTQ youth that fear the possible consequences of being outed to their parents. With your power sitting within that chair, you have the moral obligation to recall and take action to maintain a grasp regarding the values found on your website, which align with the traditional thoughts associated with school, which is that of an accepting, inclusive, and pleasant place that prepares any student that walks in for the later stages of their life. While life is always evolving and norms are ever changing, I urge the board to take in consideration the words of legendary UCLA basketball coach John Wooden when he stated, "If we fail to adapt, we fail to move forward." Frankly, this district has been presented with policies that threaten the potential home lives of LGBTQ youth. Thus, I urge and beg this school board to sit down and make the choice that best allows the positive environment of schools to keep existing and thriving within this state. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a nice Thanksgiving.
Our next speaker is Jay Runyon, then Alexa Hernandez, then Natalie Gonzalez.
Welcome. I wasn't sure if you were Jay, but yes. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you. My name is Jay Runyon, and I'm a high schooler here in Virginia Beach, and I'm here to speak against the model transgender policy. Throughout our schools, there are educators and counselors who build supportive relationships with the students, and this is something kids value more than anything. School staff who support students are critical, and it is even more important when they accept students for whoever they may be. Whether they be queer or transgender, acceptance, especially from adults they respect and trust, can mean the world. One of the main challenges transgender and gender nonconforming students face when it comes to school is dead naming. The act of dead naming tells these students that who they are does not matter, and that is not what school is about. Calling someone by their preferred name is a courtesy that shows respect, and many teachers do not have a problem with doing so. In fact, they encourage students to speak up when they want to be called by a different name or different pronouns. So, why should we force the issues of dead naming and misgendering onto teachers' laps? The shoulders of teachers are already weighed down by the burdens that come with their jobs. So why, on top of the stress their job carries, should we force them to dead name their students? It's unethical. Imagine you are in a classroom teaching the next generation, and a student comes up to you asking to be called by a different name. Who are you to deny them this basic human right? If this policy is put into effect, this is exactly what you will be forcing teachers to do, denying students a basic right. You will be damning teachers to the fate of day after day, knowingly dead naming children. However, it isn't just teachers who will be forced to do things like this. It will be counselors as well. In this model policy, it states that students will not have the access to, quote, guidance and counseling services if their parents object to them. Counselors are a vital part of school as they are always available to help students get through trying times. So, when a transgender student is feeling angry, upset, or frustrated, where should they turn if their own counselor is out of reach? Transgender and gender nonconforming students already have a challenging road ahead, and this will prove even more true if counseling is unattainable. It is common knowledge that keeping emotions bundled inside is harmful to your physical and mental health, and that is exactly what will happen if this policy goes into effect. Emotions will be kept buried down, which will undoubtedly harm transgender students. Teachers and counselors can be some of the greatest advocates and resources for our students, regardless of their gender. These policies build an impenetrable wall between gender nonconforming students and the staff that desperately wants to help them. Our plea to you is simple. Let our amazing teachers and guidance counselors be the best supporters they can be for all students. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alexa Hernandez, then Natalie Gonzalez, then Diego Billington.
Welcome, Alexia.
Hi. My name is Alexia Hernandez. I go to First Colonial High School. I'm a senior, and I just want to address the board today to address some concerns about the transgender model student policies. As the model policy effective date looms over us only days away, I'd like to make it very clear that me and my peers' persistence in this matter does not waver. We've been coming to speak to you for weeks, and we will continue to do so until true action is taken, even as the potential for tragedy grows greater and greater in each passing moment. Despite the fact that we tried to convey the new policy's detrimental effects through speech, facts, figures, and testimony, it seems it has fallen upon deaf ears. And if we cannot trust you to listen to the students for which the well-being you are responsible for, we will hope that you at least will listen to expert opinion. The 2021 policy references 20 different sources, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychiatric Association, and the Office for Civil Rights. All of these institutions strongly and publicly support this policy strategy to support trans students and their identities. The current policy also considers a variety of different perspectives, those of which contain a group of 34 educators, government officials, medical professionals, and students all listed as contributors. And looking at the 2022 guidelines, there is a stark difference. It provides 0 references, lacking in any expert validity it hopes to achieve, and lists no contributors other than Department of Education itself. In addition, when the governor's administration admits that it did not confer with any transgender students in the development of this policy. It is hard to take the 2022 model policy seriously when the administration blatantly disregards expert opinion and outright refuses to consult with the people for which this policy was most largely impact and target. whether you agree on this or disagree on this policy or not, whether your personal opinion matters or not. It is only common logic to question regulation for which there has been no cited research defending. If not to act on the behalf of the welfare of students, act on the principle that the policy does not live up to the same comprehensive standards or academic standards for which this board instills in its young scholars. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Natalie Gonzalez, then Diego Billington, then Charlie Levine.
Welcome, Natalie.
My name is Natalie Gonzalez, and I'm here to speak about the transgender student policies. Instead of simply criticizing the model policy, I would like to take a moment to praise the current policy of Virginia Beach City Public Schools, constructed in part by this very school board. A strength of the current policy is how directly it responds to the issues presented in the Code of Virginia. In Section 22.1-23.3, it is stated that transgender student policies must address several issues. These issues include maintenance of a safe and supportive learning environment free from discrimination and harassment for all students, and protection of student privacy and the confidentiality of sensitive information. We know that many transgender students already struggle in school, and we know that support from their teachers can help them immensely. A national survey by GLSEN found that 75% of transgender youth felt unsafe at school, had significantly lower GPAs, and were more likely to miss school. However, that same survey found that the opposite was true for students who feel safe in school, as they were more engaged with their communities and succeeded academically. The current policy is aware of the very real threat of violence many trans students face if they are outed to their family. The current policy is aware of how important it is that the learning environment affirms trans students. This board constructed a policy that honors the complexity inherent to navigating gender identity and gives trans students the support they need. The proposed policy, however, would force transgender students to conceal their identities from staff and even their peers to avoid having their identity revealed to their parents. This ever-present fear is the opposite of what we want. It is not at all conducive to a safe and supportive school environment and will hinder trans students' ability to thrive academically. The model policy also states that school division personnel or other students shall not be compelled to address or refer to students in any manner that would violate their constitutionally protected rights, essentially stating that even if a parent requests their child be referred to by a different name, there is no guarantee that every member of staff will do so. A transgender student must now come out to their parents only for a chance at being called their preferred name and pronouns by their teachers. Furthermore, the current policy protects student privacy and places trust in teachers to act in their students' best interest. It trusts teachers to consider every student's situation and make decisions accordingly. The model policy, however, places teachers in a difficult position. They must either violate their ethics, put their students in harm's way, or risk violating policy. The model policy insists that teachers who not only educate but guide and care for students ignore their own judgment and values, the same judgment and values that we otherwise trust them to use every day. I urge you to continue your use of the policy you developed rather than embracing a policy that is so opposed to what is right under the law and what is right for trans students. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Diego Billington, then Charlie Levine, then Icarus Landacker.
Welcome, Diego.
Good evening. My name is Diego Billington, and I have come to speak today regarding the clear violation of the Virginia Human Rights Act that the model policies pose. Firstly, the Virginia Human Rights Act, or the VHRA, prohibits discrimination based on gender identity. The model policy proposes an obvious violation of this prohibition in its intent to encourage the treatment of transgender students differently than cisgender students. No student would need written permission to go by their middle name, nor do they need such permission to be referred to with a nickname. Indeed, such occurrences are extraordinarily regular. Students named William may simply be asked to be called Will, and a student named Alexandria may be called Alex with a mere ask to do so. Due to the model policy, however, transgender students would be regularly denied their simple right to self-expression in this manner. Therefore, it is discriminatory towards transgender students who wish to express their identities. In addition, the Virginia Human Rights Act clearly states its intent to preserve public safety, health, and general welfare. The general welfare would, of course, include transgender students. The misuse or lack of use of a transgender student's preferred name directly inhibits their right as prescribed by the VHRA to health and welfare. It has been proven that not using the preferred name of transgender students is a severe detriment to not only their mental and emotional health, but to the maintenance of their physical health as well. According to an American Psychological Association study from 2018, misgendering, or the use of a dead name to refer to a trans student, causes unhealthy and potentially dangerous psychological duress, and continued usage of a student's dead name can lead to self-inflicted harm tendencies. As such, the model policies would further encourage violation of the VHRA and their inclination towards encouragement of self-harm. The general welfare, as it is defined by the Virginia Human Rights Act, specifically includes bodily and mental welfare, both of which are negatively influenced by the misgendering and dead naming of trans students. By not only encouraging, but forcing educators and administrators to dead name students, the model policies would be actively engaging in the degradation of the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of VBCPS students. I know the board understands the importance of the VHRA because the local policy cites it. There's no reason to change from a local policy that cites and aligns with the VHRA to one in clear disregard of it, especially one that would so negatively affect VBCPS's very own students. I urge you then to take a moral stance as well as a legal one in order to continue to cite and understand the local policy and effectively maintain the VHRA's credibility. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charlie Levine, then Icarus Landacker, and Alana Spencer.
Welcome, Charlie.
Good evening. The very first piece of case law that every Legal Studies Academy student learns is Tinker versus Des Moines. Mary Beth Tinker was a high school student opposed to the Vietnam War. She, among others, wore a black armband with an embroidered peace sign to protest the war. Tinker's principal suspended her indefinitely for her protest. Furious with this censorship, she filed a case claiming her First Amendment rights were violated. Tinker is cited in nearly every subsequent major students' rights case. Simply put, Tinker is the legal bedrock of all students' rights discussions. In this landmark case, the Supreme Court famously rules that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. To directly quote the Tinker case brief, the school district's actions evidently stemmed from a fear of possible disruption rather than any actual interference. The one and only reason that schools can suppress students' First Amendment rights is when this speech or expression materially and substantially interferes with learning. Changing a few syllables in a name, or even the entire name, simply is not a material and substantial interference. In every class I've ever participated in, calling students by their preferred name was no disruption of learning at all. I cannot remember a single occasion that saying the name Jay instead of Jamie took me away from my schoolwork. The idea that such a simple change harms the classroom is one based on fear rather than reality. These fears mirror the fear of black wristbands in Tinker, the same fears that the Supreme Court ruled insufficient to suppress speech. If anything, honoring a student's preferred name leads to a much stronger learning environment. According to GLSEN, an education organization working to end discrimination, harassment, and bullying, more than 53% of transgender students with support staff reported feeling that they belonged in school, and that was the case for only 18% of those without staff support. It is clear that this case law supports and protects transgender students' right to self-expression via their preferred name. These students are in no way disrupting learning. If anything, using a student's preferred name should be encouraged, as it makes them feel like school is a place where they belong. Mary Beth Tinker fought so that students could express themselves however they wanted to within their school. Transgender students thrive because of the rights to expression that Tinker granted them. You developed a policy that respected both the law and the well-being of these students.
30 seconds.
Please do not exchange it for a policy that reaches over case law and hurts these students' social and emotional learning experience. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Icarus Landacker, then Alana Spencer, then Ajax Belaine.
Welcome, Icarus.
Hello. 3 weeks ago, on Tuesday, November 1st, in the wet grass of my school's courtyard, I began writing the first draft for this address. Since that day, I have gone through 7 drafts, each one different from the last as I nitpicked every single detail possible, but each draft held the same purpose: to protect transgender students' rights. To start, I'd like to introduce you to Morgan. Morgan was a trans student who had transphobic slurs shouted at her every day in high school. It got so bad, her GSA advisor sometimes had to sit outside the classroom door to keep students from pounding on it or shouting at them during their meetings. Morgan's mother, who had worked in the school system for years, was forced to quit from all the backlash surrounding her child's transition. While Morgan did go on to graduate, Could not attend her own graduation because she did not feel safe to dress in feminine clothing. Morgan's experience is unfortunately the norm, not the exception. Over 1/3 of transgender youths consider suicide, twice the rate of their cisgender peers, and LGBTQ+ students who reported being bullied in 2020 had 3 times greater odds of attempting suicide. These stats, and all the ones you have heard and will hear tonight, are only the tip of the iceberg of all the problems trans youth face. However, if a house begins to weather, what keeps it up? Support. The same goes for people. If a student begins to struggle with their mental health, it's support from family, friends, and most importantly, teachers that will keep them standing. According to a study from the University of Texas, transgender individuals exhibit 71% fewer symptoms of depression, 34% fewer suicidal thoughts, and 65% suicide attempts when they can use their preferred names and pronouns. When trans students already have so much stacked against them, the support of their teachers becomes even more crucial. I started this with an upsetting story, but I would like to end it on a good one. I do not exaggerate when I say that my teachers are the ones responsible for me being able to stand here tonight. There is no language in this world that could explain the relief I felt when I heard my name uttered by my English teacher for the first time after I came out. I cannot explain the joy that radiated through me when I was handed a certificate only last week with my name on it because my school librarians wanted to make sure I was recognized as me. And these are only the simple actions taken by my
30 seconds.
teachers. I could conjure up a list longer than our Constitution on every bit of support I've received from my teachers. This is the support that transgender students need, and the model policy would prevent, by requiring pronouns to be based off of sex instead of gender identity. It is this support that allows stories not only to end happily, but to begin happily. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alana Spencer, then Ajax Belaine, then Geneva Warren.
Welcome, Alana.
Hello. Today I'll be talking about the mental health of students in the Virginia Beach Public City Schools and how the Virginia Department of Education's new policy will worsen the mental health of transgender students. Studies from the youth survey taken in 2021 and 2022 have proven that 80% of high school students who identify as transgender or non-binary cited depression, stress, and/or anxiety as obstacles to learning for this past school year. And just 1 in 4 non-binary students say that they're happy. Surveys from the GLSEN survey also show a vast lack of representation for transgender and non-binary students in schools, with only 35% of respondents saying their school had an active GSA or similar club during the 2020 to 2021 academic year. Less than 30% of their classes include any LGBTQ+ related topics, and just 8% said their school had policies supporting transgender and non-binary students. We can see from these studies, transgender students struggle with their mental health and are infrequently represented. In the past year, VBCPS has been working towards improving students' mental health in general, with a strategic plan on the VBCPS website saying their mission for well-being is to create an inclusive learning environment that supports the physical and mental health of all students and strengthens the social-emotional skills they need to become resilient learners who are personally and socially responsible. And the behavior supports the Code of Student Conduct, which states on page 5 in the topic district info that equity is central to the VPCS core values and equity mission. Equity refers to a barrier-free environment whereby all students, regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity, have the opportunity to benefit from the establishment of high standards and the provision of access, support, effective, and inclusive learning environments. The topic mentions that to achieve this mission, we must promote practices that advance diversity, that advance equity, and the full inclusion of all students. If you implement this policy, you will be significantly contributing to the deterioration of transgenders' mental health and contradicting your plan to improve students' mental health. This is why it's so imperative for this board to assure their non-binary and transgender students that they will not enforce these policies in our schools.
Our next speaker is Ajax Belaine, then Geneva Warren, then Andrea Palomino-Geo.
Okay, is Ajax here? Okay, how about Geneva? Okay, welcome, Geneva.
Hello, I am a sophomore at First Colonial High School, and what I am about to read is a letter written by a fellow classmate who would be directly affected by the Virginia Department of Education's model policies. Here's what they had to say. Hello, I am a sophomore at First Colonial High School. My teachers and friends most commonly know me as my preferred name, a simple adaptation of my legal name, but it's still a name that makes me feel more comfortable and to be myself. If these laws are passed in our schools, this small accommodation would be removed at the cost of mine and many others' comfort. At the cost of being ourselves, something that has been promoted time and time again from elementary to high school. To anyone else, this may not seem like a huge deal. It's just a name, right? How much of an effect can a name have? However, nearly 60% of LGBTQ youth feel unsafe in school due to their sexual orientation, and 35% for their gender identity. In no way are children trying to keep their parents out of their lives by going by a different name or pronouns. High school is a critical time for a person to start figuring out who they are and explore new things. The next years of our school career are a critical time for discovering what jobs we want to go into, trying new hobbies and sports, figuring out who we want to be. We as students are expected to do all this while volunteering, participating in extracurricular activities, and maintaining as stable of a home life as possible, even if we even have the luxury of that. And we are expected to do all this without even being able to identify as the person we want to become. I don't see how that's just or fair. We aren't asking for much, just to be called by our names and referred to as our chosen gender, not by what a screen tells us to be. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening, and I appreciate your time.
Our next speaker is Andrea Palomino-Jayo, then Madeline Haught, then Charlie Bodenstein.
Welcome. Andrea?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Andrea Palomino-Jayo, and I'm a senior at First Colonial High School. Safe space, a trigger word for people on both sides of the aisle. We can define safe spaces in all sorts of ways, but for many VBCPS students, school is this safe space, especially for those who come from neglectful households that lack a sense of security. I stand before you today on behalf of my friend who will be referred to as A. They spent a year trying different names and pronouns to stop their skin from crawling, to stop feeling like an outsider in their own body, to claim it as their own. Their name and their pronouns were found at school. For A, school was a place where they could define their identity with certainty, surrounded by peers and adults that supported them before they eventually decided to reveal their identity to their parents. But this is the sad reality. A's parents didn't accept them for who they are. They called them a disappointment. They called them a disgrace. They called them useless. And in their very words, what was the point in having you if you aren't going to have children? Situations like these would become the norm, putting students in vulnerable positions without aid if this policy gets passed. Children do not innately distrust their parents. That distrust is almost always earned. This policy is only protecting the parents who have lost the trust of their children, parents who aren't loving, supportive, and attentive rather than those who are. It strips away students from their individuality, and it puts their safety in grave danger. At First Colonial High School, home of the Legal Studies Academy, students learn of the Supreme Court case Tinker v. Des Moines, which emphasizes that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. This policy keeps students from being who they are by cracking the whip of fear. Many people call being non-binary a choice, a lifestyle, a trend. But for A and many others like them, being non-binary makes them feel at home in their own skin. Every time their name is spoken, they light up with joy, and every time they are dead named, their soul cracks a little more, and those little wriggling bugs under their skin squirm a little faster. While A has an amazing guidance counselor at FC to turn to if their home situations worsens, that's not the reality for many students throughout Virginia Beach City Public Schools. And the effects of this policy alone will silence voices of transgender students and demolish their support systems. Members of the board, I invite you to consider, where will the thousands of students like
30
A
seconds.
be able to turn if their safe space is taken away? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Our next speaker is Madeline Haught, then Charlie Bodenstein, and then Emily Labar.
Welcome, Madeline.
Hello. My name is Madeline Hott, and I'm a senior at Kellam High School, and I will be reading to you a letter from a transgender VBCPS student directly affected by the proposed model policy. Hello, my name is V. Darling, and I'm a 14-year-old trans male. I've been out of the closet about my identity with friends for a while, but it's only recently that I've been able to express myself. Starting high school was sort of a fresh start. I cut my hair and contacted my teachers to try and get them to use the name V for me. The model policies for transgender students are nothing less than terrifying for myself and many of my peers. School is a safe place for so many of my friends and other trans students, a place where they can be themselves, and taking that away is openly heartless and dangerous. In my experience, it's already very difficult to get teachers to respect my and others' gender identities. Even after 2 emails from my academy coordinator and some personal talks with them, the majority of my teachers still repeatedly misgender me and make no efforts to correct themselves. I can't imagine if I were dead named on top of that. This policy is taking an issue that has already created much heartache and pain for myself and others, and has made it 10 times worse. Requiring teachers to misgender and dead name students would be detrimental to queer students' learning environments, and that is exactly what these guidelines would ensure. According to data, as much as 82% of trans students have considered suicide, and 40% of those have attempted suicide. Outing students will only increase these statistics, as people are outed and forced into hostile home situations where they feel like the walls are caving in on them and there's no way out besides taking their own lives. That's all. There's all that I've said and so much more. This policy will endanger the lives of myself and many of my classmates and friends. Transgender students deserve to be protected and supported. I hope that you will weigh the burden this policy will have on my life, as well as my transgender peers, as you move forward and decide what policies you will and will not enforce. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charlie Bodenstein, then Emily Labar, and then Jacob Cruz.
Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. Today, I will be reading a speech by one of my peers about the transgender policies. Gender nonconforming students exist everywhere. No policy will change that. Some of them may be out, others may not. Many of the latter look up towards those in their community who take the risk of an open identity. There is comfort in knowing that if someone else could do it, there's a chance that they can too. I would know. I, a transgender student, sit here at my desk writing my plea, knowing that no matter how badly I want to tell you that these things myself, that I instead must have someone else be my voice. I can assure you that I'm far from the only one in this situation. Transgender students have depended on the pre-existing policies as a way to cling to what little sense of security we have. Knowing that if I took a leap of faith and shared my identity, that would at the very least be treated with basic respect was comforting. Now, knowing that the environment that has been built for all transgender students, closeted or not, is in jeopardy, that comfort has run away. Should this policy move forward, not every victim will be seen. Remember that every student who isn't ready to share their name with the world will be struck by these policies too. These silent victims are respected members of our community. These are student leaders. But at the end of the day, what should matter most is these are children. I'm the vice president of my school's Math Honor Society, and I have no doubt that my peers respect me. Yet, I often find myself wondering if they would respect me if I was able to open about my gender identity. The strength of my openly transgender peers has inspired me to begin making myself known, little by little. What are we, the students who are still hidden away, supposed to do when the one place we could begin to express ourselves is set to be turned against us? Is there anything we can do? No matter their status, transgender students deserve a safe place. They deserve the comfort of supportive peers and respectful administration that provide them with an environment that lets them come out at their own pace. These are environments that truly allow students to grow both personally and academically. That is how leaders are made.
30 seconds.
And that is how you raise a generation that you can confidently trust to make the world a better place. No one should be robbed of their chance to be great. I'm asking you to think twice before we lose ours. Gender nonconforming students exist everywhere. Rest assured, no policy will change that. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily Labar, then Jacob Cruz.
Welcome, Emily.
Good afternoon. The 2022 model policies are problematic both in their form and their content. In Tinker v. Des Moines, the Supreme Court ruled that neither students nor teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. The proposed policy clearly interferes with students' freedom of expression and takes away decisions that should be up to the teachers. The 2022 model policies are an overreach. The local policy has worked, and there's no reason to change it to a different, under-researched, non-supportive policy. Why should you bend the knee to a policy that harms both teachers and students? Why should you adopt a policy that would be harmful to this district, both in worsening a mental health crisis and in damaging morale among teachers, potentially worsening the teacher shortage? This isn't a policy that teachers support. It's a policy that will detriment our learning and the school environment as a whole. Every student deserves to be treated with respect, compassion, and dignity. The 2022 model policies don't have a basis in what will actually help students. They don't operate under a necessary level of research or understanding to be an improvement from the status quo. Instead, they stand to be a dangerous replacement of local policies. I know that the threat presented by this policy is not your doing, but just because something is not your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. The writers of these policies do not understand the rights and needs of teachers or students, but you do. As members of our local school board, you're much closer to the action, so to speak. You know students who will be affected by this policy. That's why I have faith you will do the right thing. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who ruled in Tinker v. Des Moines, once said, "In recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute." Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jacob Cruz.
Welcome, Jacob.
Welcome. Blank pages are sobering. They ask us questions that aren't easy to answer. When I tried to write this speech, a blank page stared at me for a while and asked me a question. Why are you still doing this? I stared at this question for a few minutes and responded to the blank page with a single word: love. We've said it before, and it has to be said again. Every 45 seconds, there's an LGBTQ youth who attempts suicide. Every 45 seconds, there's a child who is dead certain that no one loves them. So when I sit down in front of a blank page and think about why we still fight this battle, that is the thought that I can't ignore. I think of every child who is dead certain that they weren't loved, and I think of everything we have to do to show them the opposite. We have crashed cars, cried our eyes out, and wrote until our hands fall off because we know that we have to be here, because we want every trans student to feel loved. Every speech, every argument, and every letter that we write, every minute of time that we spend at these meetings was all motivated by love. Love is something that we all deserve and that we all find ways to show. For counselors, love is not just being a form-filling machine, but caring about every student and all the issues in their lives. Love is being a shoulder to cry on after a student gets berated by their parents for trying to be who they are. For teachers, love is earning a student's trust and respect and slowly watching them grow into their own skin. Love is making your classroom a place where every student is given kindness. Love is calling kids by the name that opens their heart and shows them that they are safe here. For students, love is those extra hours after homework writing your speech on top of every other responsibility in your life. Love is that 13th Google search looking for that piece of legislation that's on the tip of your tongue. And love is taking off work, not to go have fun on a free night, but to come and speak for those who can't speak for themselves. Love is what rallies every student here today because we all have friends that we love too much to see another suicide statistic or another article about a shooting. For this board, love is doing what may be uncomfortable. For some members, love may be standing up for what is right, even if it means standing against an administration that you normally agree with. We keep coming back because we have faith in the school board. We believe that just like us, at the end of the day, you are motivated by love. Love for students, teachers, and faculty, and a desire to make schools the best they can be for all students. This is the moment to show everyone that this school board is not just a rule machine, but a body that represents and responds to students and people who care deeply and that you care about everyone that you represent. It is so easy to look at the issues we discuss just as a political debate, a mental exercise,
30 seconds.
or a mental exercise. But what we really discuss today are kids. Kids that deserve love. Kids that need love more than any of us. I ask you to choose the policy that puts these students that are on the brink first. I ask you to choose love. Thank you.
That was our last student speaker, so our next speakers will be Emerson Iaquinto, Kathleen Slindy, and CJ Cruz.
Welcome.
Hello. My name is Emerson Iaquinto. I am a 21-year-old trans woman, and I'm here to discuss the 2022 model policy imposed by Governor Youngkin that would endanger transgender youth in the school system. As I am no longer in the CPS system, the only thing I can offer is my personal experience as a transgender person. My mother was a teacher at the high school that I went to, so I understand the effect that adopting these policies would have. I couldn't attend the GSA at my school, the Gay Straight Alliance, for fear of retaliation from my parents. I was severely depressed throughout my later years in high school, hurting my grades and leading to suicidal ideation. I had to drop out of college due to that severe depression that was never treated. I ended up coming out to everyone after coming home. And within 3 months, due to the abuse from my family, I was in the hospital for a week due to a suicide attempt. During that week in the hospital, I was formally diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and that is where I was diagnosed or given hormones to treat me. Within a month of being on hormones, I had them stolen twice from my parents and was kicked out of my house to live on the street. Since I've been out, I have been allowed to be myself, and I have gained a proper support system. I have become increasingly happier with life. I have started my career as a software engineer for the federal government, and I have found friends and family who support me wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, this is a more than common story among transgender and non-binary people. I'm sharing this to demonstrate really how harmful it would be to forcibly out a transgender person to unsupportive parents and disallow them from having a safe space at school. It causes undue harm on that child for no other reason than to cause that harm. My greatest wish would be for no other trans person, or any child for that matter, to go through what I had to. Unfortunately, I can almost guarantee that this policy will cause the death of more than one transgender student in the VPCPS system. I plead with the board to take a stand against these needlessly harmful policies and allow all children in school to flourish. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kathleen Slindy, then CJ Cruz, then Elizabeth Labar.
Welcome.
Good evening, Vice Chair Melnick, board members, and Dr. Spence. I'm Kathleen Slindy, and I serve as president of the VBA. This is Thanksgiving week, and I'm thankful for the voices of our students. I would like to share a list of your things that your employees would like to be thankful for, if they were true everywhere in VBCPS. It would be great to have a 3-day holiday for Thanksgiving like our colleagues in Norfolk, Suffolk, and Hampton, instead of working an adjusted dismissal day tomorrow. Your employees would be thankful for and would probably perform their work better if they had an actual 30-minute lunch break every single day. They'd appreciate and thrive if they had a reasonable workload, one that could be completed within the workday with a minimum of homework, because they work far more hours than the extra hours that you pay them for in that 200-day contract. And when policies like 611 create more work for classroom teachers, support should come at the curriculum level and not be added to a teacher's workload. Employees would like teaching objectives and class schedules that allow for a reasonable pace, because pushing educators and students like this hard is stress and anxiety inducing. Employees deserve a workplace where other duties as assigned is not used as retaliation against someone who asks the wrong question, speaks out in a public setting, or dares to point out when necessary conditions are not being met. Employees want a safe working condition, a working environment free from physical and mental abuse by students or anyone else, and they deserve to be protected just as their students do. Educators who manage caseloads that require time-consuming paperwork need the time to do that built-in work on-site in their on-site schedule and have that schedule protected. All employees deserve to be compensated on a scale commensurate to others with similar levels of preparation and not paid as if the work is merely for a second income or a hobby job for a two-income household. This is important because for many of your employees, their income is the income for that household, and it isn't enough for them to live and thrive in this city. Educators deserve to be treated as professionals who are or are becoming the experts in their chosen career, and they must not be bullied or berated in this career journey. Then maybe the attrition rate would not be climbing faster than the division's ability to replace certified teachers. Employees deserve to have a seat at the table where decisions are made that shape their profession and public education. Collective bargaining would help make VPCPS the most desirable of all school divisions in the state for our students, employees, and potential employees. We are in the business of educating the citizens and future leaders of our country. This is important
30
work.
seconds.
Everyone involved in it should believe that the work we do is vital. Everyone involved in it should have as their daily goal to support to the greatest extent possible the people who are working directly with students, teaching them, building them up physically and emotionally, feeding and caring for them, getting them to and from school, and maintaining their learning environment. There is nothing more important than this. And I know that you as a school board are very thankful to those who continue to show up and do it every day. Thank you.
Our next speaker is CJ Cruz, then Elizabeth Labar, and then Don Labar.
Welcome. Thank you. Hi, my name is CJ Cruz, and I am an alumni of Kellum High School, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to start by applauding the efforts of the students that spoke before me. We can lose sight of it pretty easily, but it's not actually normal for high schoolers to come and talk at school board meetings. It's not one of those John Hughes movie high school tropes for the Breakfast Club to spend their weeknights meeting up and planning school board speeches. I know I sure didn't. These kids are bright. They are the future, and you should listen to them. My heart is heavy tonight because 3 days ago, 18 people were wounded and 5 were killed in a shooting at an LGBT nightclub in Colorado. Protecting our LGBT communities should be at the very front of all of our minds right now. You've heard tonight that several studies show that when you dead name or misgender someone, it drastically increases that person's risk of suicide, depression, and anxiety. And this is especially true of transgender youth. As I understand it, the policy that is on the table would force teachers to dead name and misgender students unless given express written requests not to by the students' parents. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I don't think you should need a permission slip to not be dehumanized, because that is the issue that is on the table. Students' humanity, their identity, their fundamental rights to be called their name. It shouldn't be a decision. If this were the end of the 19th century and you were deciding whether boys and girls should be able to go to Virginia Beach City Schools together, this wouldn't be a decision. If this were 1954 and we were deciding whether to integrate Virginia Beach City Schools, it wouldn't be a decision. If it were 2015 and you were deciding whether students were allowed to be openly gay in Virginia Beach City Schools, it wouldn't be a decision. So why is it a decision now? It shouldn't be. This shouldn't be a decision. This should be an instantaneous and resounding action that affirms the fundamental identities of your most at-risk students and protects them. Thank you very much for your time.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Labar, then Don Labar, then Matthew Cody Connor.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Labar. I graduated from Virginia Beach City Public Schools, as did my brother and sister before me. Years ago, after obtaining my MSW, I had the first of my 3 daughters, all of whom are being educated in Virginia Beach Public Schools. After 17 years of being a stay-at-home mom, I chose to re-enter the workforce as a school social worker. If I was going to work in education, Virginia Beach was the district of choice. It's safe to say that I've watched Virginia Beach Public Schools evolve over the last 35 years, and I've been proud to be a part of it thus far. However, the 2022 model policies proposed by Governor Youngkin threaten the safety and security of students and impede my ability to do my job effectively. My training and education instilled in me, all school social workers are educated to work towards equity and root their practices in social justice. This means school social workers are educated to break down opportunity gaps and address systemic inequalities. School social workers address barriers to learning, honoring an individual's dignity and worth. We are trained to meet mental health, social, emotional, behavioral, and physical needs to contribute to academic achievement. We are trained to use best practices, ideally evidence-based, to support culturally sensitive interactions within the school setting. What are best practices? A best practice is a set of guidelines that is known to produce good outcomes. Evidence-based can be defined as a practice that has been shown effective through scientific evaluation. The 2022 model policies show no signs of being evidence-based, nor do they reflect the consensus of best practices surrounding the issue of providing an equitable education for all students, including transgender students. Evidence-based best practices dictate that policies in education should be rooted in science, and main goals should be establishing policies that provide the best outcomes for students. The evidence is clear that treating transgender students consistent with their gender identity is
30
crucial
seconds.
for the students' mental health and academic outcomes. Inclusive policies have been shown to reduce the amount of harassment transgender and non-binary students face in schools, and in turn, this improves their academic performance. In closing, I ask that you take a stand and reject the 2022 model policies. Show our community that Virginia Beach City Schools continues to put students first.
And that is time. Our next speaker is Don Labar, then Matthew Cody Connor, then Aaron Landfair.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Spence and all of the other board members for taking time to listen to me. My name is Don Labar. I'm a Virginia Beach resident, and all my children have been educated by the Virginia Beach City Public School System. I'm here to support all of the students that you just heard from, as well as students that can't be here and students that are afraid to speak up. The district goals of putting students first, the goal is right behind Ms. Weems. Seeking growth, being open to change, doing great work together, valuing differences are noble goals. But these goals can't just be something we say. They must be something that we do. I know that the school board won't just talk the talk. You will walk the walk. I already know that you're going to do the right thing. Behind Ms. Riggs is a 2025 strategic framework goals. Goals on there include student well-being, creating an inclusive learning environment that supports the physical and mental health of all students and strengthens the social emotional skills they need to become balanced, resilient learners who are personally and socially responsible. That's what you're seeing here tonight. Personally and socially responsible students that are asking for an inclusive learning environment which will support the mental health of students. There are times in my life when I look to the Bible for guidance, and I will leave you with a quote that is appropriate to what we are discussing tonight. Isaiah 1:17, learn to do good, seek justice, and correct oppression. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matthew Cody Connor, and then Aaron Lansfair.
Welcome.
Thank you. So while I speak to this member of the school board, it appears that we have or will have some new school board members that ran on a platform of parental rights. I did not vote for them. They think parents should decide what is taught in schools, and I ask, which parents? The majority of us are not college educated, and the education we did receive was filled with delusional falsehoods, such as Columbus being represented as a hero with a holiday instead of an incompetent navigator and slave trader. But perhaps I misunderstand. Maybe they just want parents to be more involved. Well, then let me make something clear. An involved parent does not require a policy to be such. When a child feels safe, loved, accepted, validated, and heard in their own home, an involved parent will not need a teacher or anyone to tell them what's going on with their kid. Their kid will tell them. The problem is not that children feel safe with and trust their teachers. The question we should ask is, why do some of these children not feel safe with their own parents in their own home? These parental rights policies and hateful policies against trans students will not make parents more involved, and they won't improve standardized test scores. They will remove the safe space, or what may be the only safe space for some of these children. And so I'd ask, why would you remove any safe space from any child? The new education policies proposed by Governor Youngkin will not improve our children's education. They will rob them of knowledge and endanger their lives. I, for one, am not willing to sacrifice the truth or safety in schools for politics. While I spend the remaining time in silent remembrance of the children's lives we have lost, I want you to spend it knowing that during this time, we might lose one more of our beautiful trans children. And I want you to contemplate
30 seconds.
what part are you choosing to play in their lives and possibly their deaths. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Erin Landfair.
Welcome. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Erin Landfair. I'm a first-year student at the University of Mary Washington studying sociology. I'm also an alumni of both First Colonial High School and the Legal Studies Academy at FC. I'm speaking to you today as an extremely concerned alumni with the intent of urging you to reject the 2022 model policies on privacy, dignity, and respect for students in Virginia public schools. For many students, unfortunately, school may be the only place that they feel safe. With parents refusing to accept their child for their gender identity, sexuality, or preferred pronouns, many find that coming to school is often the one place they can truly be themselves. As a young gay student from Virginia Beach City Public Schools, I can tell you firsthand how unbelievably terrifying it is to be a young member of the LGBTQ+ community. With more and more violent acts being committed against us, including the death of 5 members of the community just this past weekend at a shooting in a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. The places that we feel safe are dwindling more and more with every day that passes. I have been fortunate enough to have teachers and administrators who respect me and my sexuality, who respect my friends and their gender identity by asking for their pronouns and using their preferred names regardless of their parents' support. And teachers like these are the ones who are creating a safe environment in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. By requiring parental consent for students to use preferred names and pronouns, you're placing students in a position of choosing whether or not to out themselves to their parents, which could result in them being put in quite literally a dangerous situation, or them feeling unsafe in Virginia public schools. Each one of you in front of me today became a member of the Virginia Beach School Board because you care about the education system and you care about the students who are involved. This is your opportunity to show that that love does not just apply to straight students, and that that love applies to all students, no matter their personal pronouns, no matter their gender identity, and no matter whether or not their parents support them at home. If you want Virginia Beach City Public Schools to remain a safe and loving environment for all students, I urge you to reject the policies that are described in this model. Thank you.
We'll now move on to our online speaker, Vic Nichols. Please unmute. Ms. Nichols?
Legislative agenda, further restricting support can't schools that teach not be social workers. The state does that, that's what we pay them for. Reform of the assessment system, that needs to be kept. Just because the scores have been falling doesn't mean you change the goalpost to your mission. Teacher compensation, Add discipline back in the classroom and support your teachers in keeping decorum in the classes. Policy 611. What are you going to do about students who have parental permission to view the materials and show a student material where they don't have parental permission? And this will be wherever schools have authority over the student. I've been called all sorts of names, profanity, threatened, and doxxed. Not everyone is going to like what others do or say. Other students may have different and valid values. Respect and rights go both ways. Minors aren't allowed to vote or sign for mortgages, for example, because by law and medical research, they're not capable of adult decisions and responsibility. The UK women rugby players, one was folded like a deck chair, and the Loudoun County school girls raped, have rights too. Thank you.
And the second speaker is not online, so we are done with our speakers for this evening.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the information portion of our agenda. And tonight, we begin with the interim financial statements for October 2022. And our presenter this evening is Mr. Daniel Hopkins, Director of Business Services. I'll give you a second. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, School Board members, Dr. Spence. As of October 31st, the overall revenue trend remains acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. As reported last month, our September 30th enrollment is 63,598, which came in higher than the projected ADM of 63,365 that was used to build the budget for state revenue. At this time, there are no changes in the state revenues budget. Federal revenues are showing an acceptable trend as of the end of October. We have received impact aid payments of approximately $5 million. Other sources of revenue are acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. They were up mainly due to the increase in summer school. And the next graph shows that the sales tax receipts are at an acceptable level. Year to date through November, we are approximately $3.7 million higher than the same time last year. And this last graph shows that expenditures and encumbrances trend continues to remain acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. This concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions.
Mrs. Manning.
Yeah, just one question on the budget transfer. It says to cover the purchase of instructional furniture, it's page 5.
Yes.
To cover the purchase of instructional furniture for Lansdowne High School. I'm wondering if the accounts are backwards because it says from high school classroom furniture and fixture to gifted instructional supplies. It seems like it should be the other way around.
Well, that department might have paid for that school's furniture. Is that what I'm reading correctly? Are you saying the school should have received the money, or?
So it's saying that you're transferring 16,000 from high school classroom furniture and fixture to gifted instructional supplies for the purchase of furniture. It seems like it should be the other way around.
What was that? Yeah, I mean, the gifted classroom, it depends on what they were buying the furniture for.
It says instructional supplies, and
Right,
that
and
doesn't. So if you could just double check that, we will, and
All
make
right.
sure that's right. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
thank
Mr.
you.
Hopkins. All right, item B is Achieve 3000's comprehensive evaluation, and we welcome Dr. Allison Bach, Program Evaluation Specialist from the Office of Planning, Innovation, and Accountability. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm Dr. Allison Bach, a Program Evaluation Specialist with the Office of Research and Evaluation. This evening, I'll provide an overview of the key findings and recommendations from the comprehensive evaluation for the Achieve 3000 Literacy Program. The evaluation report you received in your agenda materials provides additional details. Achieve 3000 is an online literacy program that provides students with differentiated nonfiction content based on their reading level. The program is used by all students in grades 3 through 8, while it is used as a resource as needed at the high school level. When students log in for the first time, they are directed to complete a level set pretest, which is an assessment of students' reading level. Students are then provided with nonfiction content that is at the appropriate reading level based on their performance on the level set assessment. Achieve 3000 uses a 5-step lesson routine for students to engage in, including ready, read, respond, reflect, and write. Students are provided with prompts before and after reading an article that encourage them to use their prior knowledge and information learned. In the third step, respond, students answer 8 multiple choice questions about the article to assess comprehension. Based on students' performance on the respond activity portion of lessons, students' reading levels are continuously monitored and adjusted in the system if students complete at least 4 activities within a month time frame. Achieve 3000 was selected and approved for the program evaluation schedule for the 21-22 school year. The comprehensive evaluation focused on the program's operation, student characteristics, extent to which the goal was met, stakeholder perceptions, and the cost. As part of a larger survey effort, survey items about Achieve 3000 were provided to classroom teachers, administrators, students, and parents. Overall response rates and number of respondents are shown on the slide. Respondents who indicated teacher or student use of Achieve 3000 during the school year were provided with survey items. Student program usage and performance data within the program were obtained from Achieve 3000. Student data were also obtained from the data warehouse, including demographics and achievement data on other reading assessments. Overall, as expected, most elementary school and middle school students logged into Achieve 3000 at least once, while 39% of high school students did. The second portion of the chart focuses exclusively on students who engaged with Achieve 3000 throughout the year, meaning that they took the pretest and had a Lexile level measure at the end of the year. As shown, 70 to 72% of elementary school and middle school students engaged with the system, while 12% of high school students did. Achieve 3000 has identified suggestions for program usage. It is suggested that high usage of the program includes completing at least 40 activities during the school year. Based on usage data obtained from Achieve 3000 of students who engaged with the system, 63% of elementary school students, 30% of middle school students, and 9% of high school students completed at least 40 activities. On average, elementary school students who engaged with the system completed 57 activities, middle school students completed 34 activities, while high school students completed 18 activities. Achieve 3000 also has identified suggestions for activity performance. Due to providing differentiated content based on reading level, it is the expectation that students should be able to answer the respond activity questions with at least a 75% average accuracy, which would show that students are applying themselves and are appropriately matched to the content reading level. Of students engaged with the system, 35% of elementary school students had an average activity score of at least 75%, while 47% of middle school students and 60% of high school students did. On average, 61% of the attempted activities by elementary school students had a score of 75% or above, while 66 to 71% of activities were passed by secondary students. Achieve 3000 offers other components that provide teachers with resources for selecting lessons and helping them prepare and teach the lessons to their students. One resource includes searching for suggested lessons by Virginia SOL standards. As shown on the slide, 83% of elementary school teachers indicated they used this resource, while 63 to 68% of secondary teachers did. Other features include lesson recommendations, which offer suggestions for ways to introduce the topic and engage the students, and lesson materials, which offers the answer key, additional supports for struggling readers, and enrichment opportunities. Overall, at least 71% of teachers at all school levels indicated they using these lesson resources. Of the teachers who indicated they used these resources, at least 87% indicated they were either very or somewhat useful. Another feature offered to staff includes the data center, where teachers and administrators can access reports about student usage and performance. As shown on the slide, when surveyed, at least 89% of teachers and 83% of administrators indicated they accessed student reports in the data center. Nearly all teachers who accessed the data center indicated it was very or somewhat useful. In addition, at least 88% of teachers agree that student data in Achieve 3000 helps keep them informed about their students' reading progress. One other feature offered to parents of students who use Achieve 3000 is the Home Edition. This allows parents to view several types of reports for their children and provide supplemental resources to extend learning. Overall, parents did not use this feature during the 21-22 school year. Regarding awareness of their child's use, 57 to 59% of elementary and middle school parents indicated their child used Achieve 3000 in their classes, and 19% of high school parents indicated their child used it. In addition, approximately 1/3 of elementary and middle school parents indicated they did not know whether their child used the program, while the majority of high school parents indicated they did not know. In response to an open-ended question about potential improvements for the program, parent survey comments included providing parents access to Achieve 3000 and providing parents with more information related to the program. Professional learning on Achieve 3000 is provided to teachers when beginning as a teacher at VBCPS. Overall, at least 86% of teachers agree that the professional learning they received provided them with the necessary knowledge to use Achieve 3000 with students. Other support is provided directly to individual schools by Achieve 3000 representatives as needed. As shown on the slide, higher percentages of elementary and middle school teachers and administrators indicated they received direct support from Achieve 3000 than high school teachers and administrators. Of those who received direct support, at least 90% of teachers and all administrators indicated the support was useful. The student outcome goal for Achieve 3000 was for students who use the program to improve their reading skills. The goal was first examined by determining whether students exceeded growth in their reading ability beyond what would be expected for a student who started the school year with their same reading level. Exceeding expected growth is based on calculations from Achieve 3000. Whether students exceeded their expected Lexile growth was compared by students' fall pretest performance, as well as the total number of activities completed and students' average score on the activities within Achieve 3000. As a note, to be included in the analyses, students must have engaged with Achieve 3000 during the school year, which meant that they had a pretest and end-of-year Lexile level in the Achieve 3000 system. An additional analysis compared fall and spring reading inventory performance for students who were engaged with Achieve 3000 and those who were not. The figure on the slide shows the percentage of students who had larger individual growth in their Lexile levels than what was expected by Achieve 3000, based on students' fall reading performance on the level set pretest. Higher percentages of students who were meeting or exceeding grade level benchmarks in the fall also showed larger growth in their Lexile levels in the spring than what was expected, compared to students who were far below or approaching grade level benchmarks. For example, as shown by the yellow bars, from 89 to 96% of students exceeding grade level benchmarks in the fall showed larger growth in the spring than what was expected. In contrast, as shown by the blue bars, from 53 to 66% of students who were far below grade level benchmarks in the fall showed larger than expected growth in the spring. The figures on the slide show the percentages of students who had larger individual growth than expected by the number of activities completed and average activity performance. Results showed that at all school levels, students who completed more activities and had better performance on the activities were more likely to show growth that was larger than expected compared to students who completed fewer activities and had lower performance on the activities. However, it is important to note that students who had better performance on the activities were also more likely to be meeting or exceeding grade level benchmarks in the fall. Additional analyses compared the percentage of students who were reading on grade level on the RI in the fall and in the spring for students who engaged with the program as shown in blue and those who did not engage with the program but logged in as shown in orange. As shown on the slide at the elementary school level, the increase of students reading on grade level from fall to spring on the RI was 9 percentage points larger for the students who engaged with Achieve 3000 than the students who did not engage with Achieve 3000. However, as shown in the other two figures, there were minimal differences in the increases across the two groups at the middle school and high school levels. This school level difference could be related to higher percentages of elementary school students regularly using Achieve 3000 than at the secondary levels. However, it is also possible that this pattern could be related to other resources available to secondary students not engaging with Achieve 3000 that are supporting their reading skill growth. Teachers were surveyed about whether the program was meeting the needs of their students based on their students' reading level. As shown in the middle set of bars, the highest percentage of teachers at each school level, from 91 to 95%, agreed that the program met the needs of their on-grade level readers. In contrast, 59% of elementary teachers and 75% of middle school teachers agreed that the program met the needs of their readers who were below grade level. Satisfaction data showed that at least 80% of teachers, administrators, and parents indicated they were satisfied with the Achieve 3000 program. Satisfaction was somewhat lower for students, with 78% of elementary students reporting they were satisfied with the program, and from 65 to 69% of secondary students reporting they were satisfied. The total cost of Achieve 3000 to the division for the 21-22 school year was $1.4 million. The cost by school level is shown on the slide. Based on the results of the evaluation, it is recommended that the Achieve 3000 program continue with modifications noted in the following recommendations. The second recommendation is to re-examine the purpose of Achieve 3000 at the high school level, given the limited usage. The third recommendation is to encourage teachers to ensure student usage recommendations are being met, and to monitor student Achieve 3000 activity performance to ensure performance recommendations are being met. The fourth recommendation is to investigate whether there are Achieve 3000 product features that could better meet the needs of below grade level readers. And the fifth recommendation is to provide parents with additional information about Achieve 3000 and investigate providing parents access to the Achieve 3000 Home Edition. At this time, Dr. Kip Rogers, Chief Academic Officer, will share the administration's response and recommendations.
Thank you. The administration concurs with the recommendations. And while the data shown this evening indicate the use of the Achieve 3000 program is meeting the needs of some of our learners, it also reveals a lack of consistency as well as fidelity in how the Achieve 3000 program is used across and within schools. In the surveyed areas for teachers as well as administrators, agreement for meeting student needs varied by group. And given this data as well as the cost that's associated with Achieve 3000, the Department of Teaching and Learning will explore other options that would better meet the needs of all of our students and that would be more cost efficient. So at this time, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item C under information is our recovery school update with Mr. Robert Jameson, Executive Director, Student Support Services. Welcome, Mr. Jameson.
Thank you. Good evening. Make sure that's good to go. Well, good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. My name is Robert Jameson. I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Student Support Services. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the board with an update on our efforts to start a recovery school for the 2023-2024 school year. As you may recall, we provided an initial presentation on the recovery school concept at the school board retreat in July. We shared information on what a recovery school is, how a recovery school aligns with goals 1, 2, and 5 of Compass of 2025, and steps we had taken up to that point. Some of those steps included Dr. Saltner, Mr. Delaney, and I, with input and assistance from Mrs. Weems, researching recovery schools, gathering information from the Association of Recovery Schools, contacting recovery schools in North Carolina as well as New Jersey, and beginning conversations with the Virginia Department of Public Health to learn more about effective structures and services for recovery schools. Additionally, Dr. Soltner, Mr. Delaney, Mrs. Weems, and I visited the Coastal Prep Academy, a recovery school in Cape May, New Jersey. And from July to now, we have continued to communicate as a team with Mrs. Weems to share updates on progress, and I'm here tonight to outline some steps that we have taken over the past few months. As a reminder, the purpose of a recovery school is to educate students in recovery from substance abuse and dependency with an educational and recovery focus. Ultimately, the goals are to offer a fresh start for students, provide them with the necessary therapeutic services, and help ensure progress toward a high school diploma. As of 2020, there were a total of 43 recovery schools in 20 states in the United States, and in Virginia, Chesterfield County requested funding from the General Assembly, is in the process of opening a recovery school this year. Recovery schools aim to create a learning environment where students can receive an excellent education while also gaining the support for their recovery. Recovery schools are intended for students who are willing to be active participants in their education and recovery processes. With that said, recovery schools are not a placement in response to a disciplinary infraction. Instead, they are a partnership between students, their families, and the school community. These types of schools usually operate from an off-site location to remove students from the environment where they may have been accessing the illicit substances and to allow school leaders to effectively lead their schools, since relapse is expected throughout the recovery process. Furthermore, model recovery schools provide readily accessible wraparound services based on expressed needs, and VBCPS is working to align with this approach. For this presentation, we are introducing a proposed name for the recovery school, the Tides Preparatory Academy. Throughout the remaining slides, the use of the Tides Preparatory Academy by name is unofficial until appropriate school board approval. This slide outlines the next steps Mr. Delaney and I shared in July. Given the board approval at that time, these were the steps we planned on taking to open the Tides Preparatory Academy for next school year. However, as we were moving through these steps, our timeline was modified because of an opportunity that became available through the Virginia Department of Education, specifically funding through the College Partnership Laboratory School application. College Partnership Laboratory Schools are intended to support at-risk students, promote regional diversity, and provide support for innovative programs to meet community and regional needs. The General Assembly included a $100 million disbursement into the College Partnership Laboratory School Fund during its 2022 session to support planning, startup, and operating grants. In August, VBCPS met with members of the Old Dominion University faculty from the Darden School of Education and the Counseling and Human Services Department. We discussed our goal of opening a recovery school for students in Virginia Beach and our desire to form a partnership through the lab school opportunity. Through this collaboration, we recently submitted a planning grant application to the VDOE, and if approved for the planning grant, VBCPS and ODU would receive $200,000 collectively to execute initial next steps. So while the Tides Preparatory Academy will follow the national model of recovery schools, ODU and VBCPS will provide the curriculum and educational support necessary for each student to receive their high school diploma while in recovery. As previously shared with the board, targeted counseling and psychoeducational services will be provided daily, with additional community resources being made available for students and their families. Through the Darden College of Education and Professional Studies, ODU students will receive hands-on experience as well as provide in-person support for VBCPS students, and the ODU staff will offer professional development for our VBCPS teachers throughout the year. Furthermore, related to our focus on future-ready learners, as recovery school students earn their high school diplomas, they will have the opportunity to pursue post-secondary certifications in addiction prevention and treatment at ODU. The partnership will strengthen the ability to provide relapse prevention, family systems consultation and collaboration, trauma-informed care, and other skill development for our students. With assistance from ODU and community stakeholders, VBCPS will also provide case management, screening, monitoring, and wraparound transitional care as needed. Overall, based on the data-determined needs of each specific student attending the recovery school, this partnership will help with the creation of individualized service and educational plans to meet our students' needs. The community organizations listed here will be involved in the planning, development, and implementation of the Recovery School to help ensure students have access to support during and after school hours. And from community events to small group activities, as well as mental health services, these mutually supportive partnerships aim to extend the wraparound services previously outlined. VBCPS and ODU expect to receive a response from the VDOE on the planning grant application by the end of the calendar year. If approved, we will continue our collaborative efforts, look to hire an academy coordinator and school counselor using grant funds, conduct an area needs assessment for program development purposes, secure a location, and submit a startup grant application. Again, this presentation was merely an update on the progress made since the school board retreat in July. As we await a decision on the planning grant application, we simply wanted to outline the partnerships and funding we are exploring for the Tides Preparatory Academy. These recommendations serve as merely considerations for the board in the interim after VBCPS receives notification from the VDOE regarding our planning grant application and the next steps from the previous slide are executed. Mr. Delaney and I will provide a formal presentation to the school board in alignment with Regulation 6-24.2. Thank you for this opportunity to share these updates, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Ms. Weems.
Thank you. Well, it's no surprise that I have a lot of personal passion for this recovery school. And just briefly, I'm going to make a few comments about this opioid epidemic that's been around for a while, way too long. And little or nothing has been done at the state and federal level. Obviously, the epidemic has expanded its grip on people because of COVID, because of the unintended consequences of COVID, a lot of closures, isolation, not access to recovery or resources, and also with the arrival of fentanyl just pouring in our country, it has really changed the name of the game. We've seen it impact our students and impact our schools and our families here in Virginia Beach. So I want to thank Dr. Spence for listening to me 3 years ago when I came to your office and talked about this, and for not hiding, you know, our heads in the sand and saying we don't have an issue here, because every place in America has an issue. 110,000 people, Americans, lost their lives last year. 300 of our citizens died today. 110,000 a year, 300 a day. And primarily because of the opioids. So it's serious. I also want to thank Dr. Soltner, who's not here with us anymore, but I'm sure he's watching tonight. Mr. Delaney, Mr. Sutton, and Mr. Jameson for your work. Y'all have done a lot, and I appreciate your vision and your passion and your hard work in this area. I look forward to the really specific updates, and I guess we will see those either December 13th or maybe in January, depending on when we get the word back from the Department of Ed. But I think this will be a one-of-a-kind place, especially with the partnership with Old Dominion, and the fact that if our students can go through this program and then can go study how to help others and get a degree, that is just remarkable. And, you know, so many universities have sober living places, and they actually have Ramsey and Recovery, VCU is an example, where you can actually go there and have this recovery support around you. So just think, if we can provide that for our students here for 4 years, and then they can choose another, you know, higher education, either Old Dominion or somewhere else, that's 8 years of recovery, and that's life-changing. If you haven't been faced with the opioid epidemic or addiction, substance abuse disorder in your household, you do not understand at all the frustration and the hopelessness that families in Virginia Beach have, because there's no place to go, there's no place to get help. So this will solve that immensely. I'm very proud to be part of this, and I hope my colleagues will support it, and will listen carefully when we get the update in a few weeks. Thank you once again for all your hard work, Mr. Jameson, and everybody else. Thank you, Dr. Spence.
Thank you, Mrs. Weems. Mrs. Manning.
Yeah, and I want to thank Ms. Weems as well for her leadership on this and just sticking with the issue and making it happen. Ms. Weems has taught me and so many others about the dangers of opioids. You know, when my son was prescribed opioids, I would have never given it a second thought to give him as many pills as he would need. But thanks to Ms. Weems, she's educated so many people on the dangers, and I'm so thankful for that. And I echo staff, thank you as well for all of your hard work and dedication to this. You've definitely gone above and beyond, and I know Dr. Saltner as well was very passionate about this.
Yes, ma'am.
A couple of questions that I have for you. What do you imagine the enrollment numbers being with kind of, I know there's nothing final right now, but do you have any ideas on that?
We do. We really, in looking at the research, it does show you do want to have a cap, especially in your first year. And in working with Virginia Department of Public Health, they recommend anywhere from 15 to 25 in year one. So that's our target group. We will, of course, look at the demand. That's where that area needs assessment will really drive a more concrete answer to your question. But 15 to 25 is what we've seen in the research as an initial year enrollment.
Okay, and that's based upon, we have the demand for that?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And this, again, speculation, as from what we are hearing from EVMS, Centera, CHKD, Kempsville Center for Behavioral Health, Barry Robinson Center, they are letting us know there is a need that they're unable to address. And with the various numbers that they have for admissions, that we do believe we can fill the 15 to 25. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then just curious where the name Tides came from. Is it just the area?
It is the area. The idea that a community can really raise up any vessel, no matter the size, was the idea behind that.
I like that. And then an idea that I have had before we had the opportunity to apply for the lab school program. I know that our city received a sum of money, I don't know how much it was, from a lawsuit from pharmaceutical companies from the opioid epidemic. I don't know how much that is, or have we approached city council to see if that could be a potential if we don't have enough money for?
We haven't approached them yet. I think we're starting with this grant proposal to see where it goes, because there is a substantial amount of money behind that to help provide additional funding. So we haven't approached city council. We also haven't approached the legislature, although we know that there was substantial money put into Chesterfield County's recovery program through the legislature last year during General Assembly. So that's another avenue. We started here.
Yeah.
And we figure after here, we'll branch out and figure
Great.
out where are the other options for additional support.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Holtz.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I know you've been working long and hard at this. And when you introduced it to us last spring, or actually it's been over a year that we've actually discussed it, I did a little looking into this school in New Jersey. And at that time I was puzzled because I heard there were only 5 students enrolled. Anyhow, that's not really my question, that's just a comment, but I really have a problem and so many questions about, like, where is this going to be housed? And maybe you can't answer that yet. How many personnel are going to be involved? But my main question is, do we really need this in Virginia Beach City Public Schools? We definitely need it. And I agree with everything that Ms. Weems said about the crisis here in our community and all over the nation. But you mentioned, thankfully, the mutually supportive partnerships that we have. There are 4 of them, the Life Changing Institute, Meridian, I'm familiar with Meridian, and they have a teen program, and that's located off Independence Boulevard, not too far from me. And then the CHKD has a special supportive program with Norfolk City Schools, and I wonder why we don't have that, because they have professionals and they have doctors that understand substance abuse. So my question is, do we really need this? Right now, I'm not convinced because there's so many other avenues. We have parents and discussions every day about, now that we've had a deficit with the 2 years of the pandemic, let's get back to basics, let's do this, let's do that, let's pull the kids up. I just, at this moment, this doesn't fit in, since we have other alternatives that are already proven. I don't understand this. So maybe in the future, if you come with more information, or we get some kind of a grant. But I did read in the grant something about, it was going to be, the grant depended on per pupil per head. Well, if there's only 5 students, I don't think that's enough or sufficient. Plus the fact that I have a concern about confidentiality. These drugs are still illegal. How are you not afraid that our children will be stigmatized? Have we ever talked about that? So that's a question I have that's really disturbing to me. So I'm looking forward maybe in the future to more presentations or something that will make it clearer. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you. I realize that there is a huge need for help with parents who have children who have become addicted to these types of drugs. And I do have a lot of empathy and sympathy for them. But as was pointed out, there are already some facilities that do deal with this. However, I have several questions that I have listed here. And so just, I would like you just to take these questions and be able to, you don't have to answer them all tonight, but I'd like you to come back with some answers for some of these questions. Some of them have been addressed. For example, do we have any estimate of the number of students that need this type of facility? I think Ms. Manning asked that a few minutes ago, and you addressed it with possibility of 25 or more. I'm not sure if we actually have that many the first year, and we can address those needs, then more power to us. Another question, have you tentatively identified a space or building? Next question, will parents have a choice in allowing students to attend this facility, or is it something that we would just highly recommend, or would we require that if they have already been in a place, where the insurance is paid first? What happens if we don't get the funds from a grant? I'm not sure. I mean, being that we can't adequately raise our teacher salaries to meet the needs of our current teachers now, and we've struggled with meeting the demands of what teachers need for their pay so that they can afford to even live in our city. Where do we get the funds for this if the grant is not approved? I think we need to think along those lines, because I'm not willing to cut anything in our current budget to begin this, even though I realize that there may be some students out there that this could greatly help. I'm not sure it meets the needs of all of our current students, and I don't want to slight somebody who really could use it. I get that, but I'm just not sure that we need to be able to pay the funds for people and taking them out of do we take these people who are going to be teaching this out of our current classrooms? I mean, where are we going to find the people for this? I have a lot of questions on this. And then my final question has to do with legalities. And so it's something that I think we need to explore thoroughly in making sure that legally we are covered. I feel like the legal department needs to weigh in heavily on this and make sure that, that we're actually legally covered down the road. I'm sorry, I do have a couple more questions. Have we explored a partnership with other local school divisions on this, i.e. Chesapeake or Norfolk or Portsmouth or all the local Tidewater school divisions. And then I guess my final question was, where are we going to find the personnel to teach in this new facility? So these are all questions I feel like, we need to address. And the financial obligation of it is something that we really need to stress hard, because if we start this, it's not something that we're going to pull back from if we don't have a grant down the road. So does that mean a grant every year, a grant every 2 years? How do we do that? Because, once you start something, it's horrible to have to end it because you don't have the funds to continue it. So I'd like us to explore these questions, and if you could come back with some other answers down the road, I'd like to address those things as well. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We will explore the answers to those questions. I would like to offer just, I guess, one comment in response to that. I have yet to find in my experiences a facility or a program locally that meets the needs of students who are in recovery. From an educational standpoint, as well as from a recovery standpoint, and to add on to that statement, that does not require them to leave Virginia Beach City Public Schools. And this model provides an opportunity for students that we just do not have locally. Many times it's something that has to be done after school, which then provides an issue in terms of access, as well as an issue in terms of consistency. And this program is designed to bring those two issues together so that we can collectively address those concerns. From a financial standpoint, I do agree. And I think that that's a decision that we will have to discuss as a board in terms of the value of what this program could bring, the value of what one student's life being saved could be, and what we can then do moving forward from a proactive and preventive standpoint. But we will certainly look at the responses to these questions and ensure that they're included in the formal presentation we provide.
Thank you very much for that. And I agree with everything that you've said. And oh, by the way, the name would fit very easily if we did partnership with some other local school divisions.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Owens.
Sounds like some of the questions I have already been put out there. I am hoping to kind of get an idea, I guess maybe at our next presentation, unless you have an idea already about kind of specifically how many staff members we anticipate being in the program year one. I was a little surprised at how far in we are with planning, not necessarily in a negative way, but when it was talked about last as being an exploration, and now we're in a partnership and have proposed name. I do have some questions or concerns about the possibility of having a vote on anything without knowing the grant situation, the way number 3 is worded, the recommendation of the use of local funds to open it should we not receive the grant approval. The need is there. We know the need is there. We know that we haven't been able to serve these students. But to do it with local funds at this time would be a concern. And so hopefully we'll hear more about that and maybe have those answers more complete before we get to a point for vote, to make sure that we have the continued funding as well.
Just to be clear, we're not anywhere close to the point of having a vote. The purpose of a planning grant is to spend a year planning and to provide answers. Now, we have thoughts around most of the questions that have been asked, and can certainly during the planning process nail that down to a great deal of specificity. We have been actively thinking about the staff that would need to be involved. If you saw in the planning grant, there are staff that we would ask for as part of the planning grant to support the planning process. And certainly I've been looking at facilities because that will be an important question we would need to answer. But we're not anywhere near, to put everybody's mind at ease who's concerned with this list of questions, that we're not anywhere near coming to the school board to say we're ready for a vote and to move this thing forward as a school. That is a down the road project for us. We are in the planning stages. The proposed partnership with ODU is proposed through the planning grant. If we get the planning grant, we will be engaged in a partnership with ODU. If we don't, we're not engaged in a partnership with them, so we're not committing the board to anything yet.
Okay, and the, I guess, goal or estimated opening, is that August 2023, or that's for the actual partnership for planning?
So we need to get the planning grant, and then we're gonna see how fast we can
That's pretty fast.
organize our thinking to get there. Right, it could be. However, again, there's been quite a bit of exploration going on, and depending on, so for example, if we were to get the planning grant, we were able to mobilize, find the facility, identify the staff, come back to you and tell you we'd also received additional funding from the state to open the building, we could do that in a relatively short turnaround. If we're not able to do that and we're back to ground zero on where are we going to find the funding for this, it could take longer. Our goal is to move it along as quickly as we can because the need is real. But we're going to do that in a way that is sustainable. We're going to do that in a way that answers all of your questions.
Okay.
All right, Mrs. Holtz.
I think if we have any money at all to spend, it should be spent in reinforcing education. We already do have some, but not enough, so that we wouldn't be in a position of recovery. Let's call it discovery, so that kids wouldn't be involved in drugs early on. Someone mentioned here tonight about now we have a pathway for 8 years of recovery. I put myself in the position of a parent with a teenager. My goal is not for 8, and if they do have a drug problem, my goal is not to looking forward to a pathway to 8 years of recovery. And I would not be very happy if they were in a classroom with 25 other students who also had problems with drugs. When you enter a program, you don't get cured, or you don't reach your goal the first day. It takes some time. It could take several years, I'm aware of that. I don't know that that's healthy. So that's another question that I forgot to ask before, but thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything further, colleagues? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Thank you very much.
Have a great evening. Happy
And with
Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. So with that, we move on to item D under information. Welcome, School Board Attorney Cami Linetti. Looks like we have one policy, 18 bylaws.
No, it's more like 21, so.
Okay.
But don't panic.
Okay.
As exciting as policies and bylaws are, I will say of the 21 that we're presenting on behalf of the Policy Review Committee tonight, 11 of them we're only recommending grammatical corrections, and 5 of them we are recommending no changes. And just to remind you, as part of our responsibility, every 5 years you need to look at your bylaws and policies. We are starting that over again. We started this about 5 years ago, and we're back to this. So that is why we're looking through them again. So don't panic. We're going to get through this. All right. The first one is probably going to be the most difficult one. That is Policy 611. We are going to be asking, on behalf of the Policy Review Committee, for you to adopt a new policy, 611. This is a requirement with the law that came through last year that it requires us to have a policy on instructional material with sexually explicit content. We waited as long as we could to see if we can get some clarifications from the Virginia Department of Education on this. There were some questions that the Council of School Attorneys presented. We have not gotten any further clarification on that, so we went ahead and produced this policy for you, and there'll be a supporting regulation. We first brought this to the Policy Review Committee in September to review at it. We brought it back in November just to look at it. We are not recommending changes on it. This is a significant amount of information. However, it is based off of the model policy presented by the Virginia Department of Education. We have not made any significant changes from that. So it's going to set out procedures and definitions of how we're going to have to identify sexually explicit material, how we're going to have to give notice to the parents, how there will have to be alternative material that's provided to them, and an opportunity for the parents to take a look at that material or ask for alternative material on there. It is not, again, not a significant change from what was proposed in the Virginia Department of Education model. It just fits the way we format our policies. I'm not, unless you want me to go through it individually by that, my suggestion is you would look at this policy and our recommendation is that you adopt it. This is compliant with what VDOE is requesting for us to implement.
And may I ask how that went in the policy review committee?
We were all there and we were all in agreement to this. There were no questions or concerns. We were fine. Ms. Hughes, you want to add to that?
No, there's not a lot to add. I mean, the language is right in compliance with the legislation, so pretty much nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, I thank you for that work. Thank
And
you.
much of it models what Dr. Rogers previously presented to you on your book challenges, some of the information. So that information is pretty consistent with what we're doing with some of our book challenges. But this, of course, is exactly what VDOE is recommending. So we're
Okay.
not offering any
And before you
changes.
go on, Mrs. Manning has a question.
Yeah, so about 6 months ago, I sent the policy review committee chair, and I believe I copied legal and maybe the school board as well, on some suggestions that I had that I wanted the policy review committee to look at regarding sexually explicit library materials. And I was told that, wanted to kind of see where the law was going on this first. But I never really got a response back, and it's been 6 months. So I'm just wondering where we are with the policy review committee looking at that.
But this particular policy, under section B on definition, section 3 defines what instructional material is. We pulled this exactly from the.
No, I'm not disputing that. I'm fine with this. I'm just saying that separate from that, I made a request to have sexually explicit library materials looked at, and I was told that you wanted to see where the law was going first, and that was 6 months ago, and I never received a response, or whether or not the policy review committee has considered my suggestions.
We have not gone back to look at the book challenge policies that you were talking about, like 7.
It wasn't the challenge policies. It was suggestions around how, we could notify parents about sexually explicit books, perhaps put ratings on books. I sent it to Ms. Riggs, and I think I copied you on it.
Again, I would tell you any ratings requirements that you're going to have put in books are probably going to violate the First Amendment, so we probably would not be looking at that.
I was just putting out suggestions on what perhaps could be done. I wasn't saying I had the answer. I was just asking the committee to look at my concerns.
We can certainly take that back at the December meeting and take a look at it.
I think what we decide, we didn't talk about it, but in discussing this policy, and knowing what we have in place for parents to see about sexually explicit materials, books, and all of that, they have the opportunity to fill out the form and send in what they want their children to have and not have. So we felt like that was adequate. That's why we didn't discuss it any further. I mean, Ms. Hughes, you want
to? So we actually did not have whatever it was Ms. Manning sent on one of our agendas. So that was not discussed. This in particular, I mean, one of the things I mentioned was that I don't think we should have sexually explicit materials in the schools, but we do. So we have a policy here that reflects the state guidelines. If we want to add Ms. Manning's suggestion to the next agenda and discuss it, we could do that.
Okay, and so,
We can put it on for the December PRC meeting,
fair
we'll
enough.
discuss it.
Okay, fair enough. And Mrs. Weems?
That was my request.
Okay.
On the next meeting, thank you.
Okay, done.
Yeah, now we're going to move back to the bylaws, as we brought you a lot of bylaws last time. We are finishing up the rest of the bylaws that need to be taken a look at. On bylaw 125, which is public complaints and procedures, you did a lot of work on this in 2020. So the only change we're recommending is a couple grammatical changes, correcting some punctuation marks. Other than that, we are not recommending any further amendments to bylaw 125. Are there any questions on bylaw 125? Hearing no questions on bylaw 125, we'll move on to bylaw 126. This is school visitations. Again, these are simply grammatical errors. We're correcting some punctuation errors. Other than that, we're not recommending any further amendments to bylaw 126. Any questions on 126? No questions on 126. I will move on to bylaw 127. This is service of process, which is a legal issue. The only thing we're correcting here is the title instead of legal counsel back to school board attorney. Those are the only recommendations we're making on bylaw 127. Any questions on bylaw 127? Hearing no questions on bylaw 127, I will move on to bylaw 128. Bylaw 128 has a couple name changes that we had to correct in here. Your Department of Audit, Internal Audit, that had to change on there. There was also a reference on that section C under the Internal Audit Committee. A couple changes again on the school board, from legal counsel to school board attorney under your current terms. And there are changes, and pull the last one. Sorry, on bylaw. Under bylaw, oh goodness, sorry. Section, let's see, here we are, section 4 in the governance committee. There's a very long list of the various duties the governance committee has under. We are suggesting adding a subsection L, which will describe the development of the school board attorney's contract, description, evaluation, and handling the annual evaluation, routing that to section. Then we'll renumber the final one, which was L, which had to do with other duties, will now become M. And then moving on to number 7, under student discipline committees, we're suggesting adding a final sentence in. This has always been the law. It's just never been in any of our policies and committees on there. So the final section to that would be, if only 2 school board members are present for a committee hearing, the school counselor may vote in place of the school board member. However, any decision in which a school counselor has cast a vote may be appealed to the school board for a hearing. Again, that's always been in the law, but a couple times I've been asked over the years, where is that? I went ahead and added it here because it does come up periodically when we don't have enough school board members on there. So we just went ahead and added it for clarification purposes. There are a couple of formatting issues here to correct some of the formatting throughout the rest of the bylaw, but after that, there is nothing significant that happens in that bylaw. Again, 120 is a very long bylaw that you've looked at multiple times over the last couple of years, but the changes are actually relatively insignificant. Are there any questions on 128, I'm sorry? Hearing no questions on 128, we'll look under bylaw 129. This is school board staff communications. Staff reports to the staff communications, staff reports to the school board. There are no recommended amendments to bylaw 129. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions on 129, I will move on to 130. Again, there will be no amendments to this. This is adoption, amendment, repeal, or suspension of bylaws. You looked at that, did some changes in 2021, and we are not recommending amendments at this time. Are there any questions on bylaw 130? Hearing no questions on bylaw 130, I will move to bylaw 131, which is policy formulation. There are only, I think, one grammatical change in the first paragraph. Other than that, we are not recommending any amendments in the PRC. Are there any questions on bylaw 131? Hearing no questions on bylaw 131, I will look to bylaw 132, which is adoption, amendment, repeal, or suspension of policies. This looks worse than it is. You'll see some changes. What we actually did is we took the third paragraph, merged it back into the first paragraph, and split it out. Just there seemed to be some clarification that needed to happen. The wording is not significantly different. We just put them where we thought was appropriate in the first 2 paragraphs. Couple other changes under subsection C. We had a sentence about what happens if requests for adopt, amend, or repeal policies that are not sent to the policy review committee for review should be submitted to school board members. So occasionally it doesn't come directly to policy committee because your bylaws and laws allows people to submit a policy to you. In that case, it's just a clarification that can come in through another method and then forward on to school board members. Other than that, there are no other recommendations for bylaw 132. Ms. Hughes?
Yeah, one of the things that we discussed about this during the meeting was adding a line about where the policy came from, who submitted it.
Oh, you're correct about that, Ms. And I don't think we actually, I don't think we wrote that into the bylaw, although we said that we would do it in the, what public probably doesn't see is when we submit them, there's usually a sign off, like a legal, you'll see it sometimes when it comes in for vote, it'll have my sign off for content. We were suggesting adding another line there where we put up my sign off for legal content, that we would also put one for to indicate who was in there. I can write that into the bylaw if you want to. We don't normally write that in the bylaw, it's just part of the sign off process.
Well, I actually would like that, and what we discussed, I mean, just for the people who weren't there, was that sometimes it comes from a particular department or something like that, and you can actually go back to the person or group that submitted it to find out why and make it, clarify it, make it make more sense. And, in that kind of an instance, you might actually be more likely to pass something that someone submitted because you know what the thinking was behind it or how it would make their job easier or something like that.
Are you asking for this to go back to the December meeting, or is this something that can?
Mrs. Hughes, if I may jump in, under section A, approval, if you see, looking at it, we now, instead of having 3 paragraphs, we're basically gonna have 2, but the third paragraph has a large chunk taken out of it. And the only thing remaining in the third paragraph is all policies will be submitted to the Policy Review Committee for review and recommendation before being submitted to the school board for approval. We could add another line there stating that the policy will note where it was originated from.
That's fine.
Okay, Mrs. Manning.
Yeah, I just have a spelling correction or grammar correction. It's on the second paragraph. It says, the addition, when the school board attorney signs a policy as legal sufficient, it should be legally sufficient.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I see there's the third time. Okay, yes, I've got that corrected. And then, Mrs. Hughes, what I would do is add that sentence to what was the third paragraph, and I'll just add another sentence that says the policy will note where it originated from.
Okay.
If the rest of the school board doesn't have a problem like that, I will get that corrected and submit it to you for when it comes on for the action agenda. Good. Okay, it doesn't need to go back to PRC.
Okay, good.
If there are no further questions about bylaw 132, look at bylaw 133, which is formulation, approval, revision, rescission of regulations. The only correction is in the spelling of the word rescission in the title. That's the only recommendation I'm making at this time.
Okay.
And if there are no questions on bylaw 133, goodness. Bylaw 135 is annual budget and financial decision-making, notice time period for annual budget. We are just making a grammatical correction around the parentheses in the second paragraph. Other than that, we are not recommending any other changes to bylaw 135. Any questions on 135? Any questions on 130?
Manning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just lost everything in front of me, so, but I wrote down, it says, there were no changes on it, it should be reviewed, not amended at the very end.
Well, actually, it's not, I'm sorry, it changes. If you look in section B, we were moving the parentheses around. So that
Oh, okay, so there was a change. Okay,
yeah, it's a
never
minor
mind.
change.
Okay.
Here, no more questions on 135. I'll look at 136, which is open meetings and closed meetings. There were a couple grammatical changes we were making throughout here, mostly punctuation issues coming in. Changing in section B, we changed the word action to the word vote. Other than that, it was mostly picking up, there was a couple misspelled words or partial words that were in there that were taken out. And other than that, it was almost all grammatical corrections to the rest of that bylaw after that. Are there any questions on 136? Hearing no questions on 136, I will move to 138. Again, grammatical changes of what are being recommended. This title is regular meetings, time and place, order of business, recess meetings, work session, public hearings, retreats, and abridged meetings. Again, there are, I think actually, I don't think it's one in grammatical change in section A, the title of section A. Other than that, we're not recommending any other changes to bylaw 138. Looking at bylaw 139, which is agenda preparation and notice, we are not recommending any changes or amendments to bylaw 139. Are there any questions about bylaw 139? Hearing no questions on bylaw 139, we'll move on to bylaw 140, which is parliamentary authority, special rules of order, and standing rules. Just a grammatical change, I believe, in the title. Other than that, we are not recommending any changes. And I'm actually looking at that might have to be amended. This might be the one we have to do amended since it does appear to be a grammatical change. So I would change reviewed to amended. Are there any questions about bylaw 140? There are no questions on bylaw 140. Move on to bylaw 141. There are just grammatical changes to the words that the chairman, we're moving it back to being just chair in that. Other than that, there are no further recommendations on bylaw 141. There are no questions. I'll move on to bylaw 146, which is special meetings. They were just formatting issues. We went ahead. We thought this was always a difficult one to read, so we broke that up into 3 bullets under the first section under there and did a couple grammatical things. Other than that, we will not recommend any significant changes to bylaw 146. Any questions on bylaw 146? Moving on to bylaw 147, this is public comments at school board meetings. She did a lot of work on this in, oh goodness, multiple times in 2021. So at this time, we are not recommending any amendments to bylaw 147. Any questions on bylaw 147? Hearing no questions on bylaw 147, we will move on to bylaw 148, decorum and order of school board meetings. While going through this, I realized you had a new bbcps@schoolboard.com email, and that's what needed to be corrected in this. So that was, so
So I thought it was schoolboard@vpcpsboard.com. That's what I've been telling people. Is that not it?
I believe
The email should be what's crossed out. It should
Yeah.
be
because we were
school
told we had
board
corrected
at,
this.
right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mrs. Toniano, can you repeat that? BBCPS.
It's, school board at vbcpsboard.com.
Okay, then we will go ahead and check that because we were told to correct that one. All right, we will fix that then. With that correction, there would be no other recommendations for decorum and order at school board meetings. Any further questions on bylaw 148? Hearing no questions on bylaw 148, we have the remaining appendix A. Appendix A is special rules of order. We, again, recommending our changes here is to remove out chairman and just make that chair. And that would be the only recommendations that we are suggesting for appendix A. Any questions about appendix A? Hearing no questions on appendix B, appendix A, we will look to appendix B, which is your last appendix on here. This has to do with school board standing rules. Again, you amended this about a year ago, and we are not recommending any changes to appendix B. With that, there are no further recommendations from PRC, and you are done your bylaw section. You will not have to look at this again for 5 years.
Wow, that's great work. I thank you. Hopefully I can say on behalf of the board, I thank the PRC for all of that work. Thank you. Hope I did not offend anybody, but that's good stuff. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We have a resolution for Human Rights Month, which you do have. Would you like to read that first?
Sure.
Okay.
Have the resolution for Human Rights Month, December 2022. Whereas Human Rights Day is observed every year on December 10th, which is the day the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and whereas in 2022, Human Rights Day is focusing on how rights are the beginning of peace within societies and a way to create a fairer society for future generations, and whereas Human Rights Month is a time to come together and remember that human rights are universal rights and that everyone should be treated with respect and be free from discrimination. And whereas human rights are at the core of the division's strategic framework, core values, teaching and learning framework, and educational equity policy. As in the absence of human dignity, we cannot hope to accomplish our mission to empower every student to become a lifelong learner who is responsible, productive, and an engaged citizen within the global community. And whereas the school board of the City of Virginia Beach are positive advocates for the human rights of every member of our school division. Now therefore be it resolved that the school board of the City of Virginia Beach officially recognizes the month of December 2022 as Human Rights Month, and be it further resolved that the school board of the City of Virginia Beach encourage participation and solidarity in the various school and local activities during Human Rights Month, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of this board, adopted by the school board of the City of Virginia Beach this 22nd day of November 2022.
Okay, in addition, we have the new courses that were presented at the last meeting Those are MYP Physics, IB DP Sports, Exercise, and Health Science, AP Physics C, Electricity and Magnetism, Honors World History and Geography, AP Pre-Calculus, Foundations of Police Science, Renewable Energy Technologies 1 and 2. We also have on our consent agenda religious exemptions. Are there any objections to the school board voting on the consent agenda items in its entirety? Okay, seeing none, then I call for a motion to approve all of the items on the consent agenda as presented. Motion made by Mrs. Hughes, seconded by Mrs. Holtz. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand.
Ms. Anderson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair, we have 10 ayes. The motion did pass.
Thank you. Okay. Our action item, personnel report and administrative appointments. So I call for a motion to approve the November 22nd, 2022 personnel report and administrative appointments.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Anderson, second by Mrs. Manning. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, raise your hand.
Ms. Anderson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Franklin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair, we have 10 ayes. The motion did pass.
Okay, and there are no administrative appointments this evening. Any committee, organization, or board reports at this time? Ms. Owens.
Thank you. I have kind of two updates. One, as liaison with the Equity Council, we met on November 17th. Ms. Weems and I both attended. The council is continuing work, looking at the first goal of the equity plan and kind of digging in there. And so the work continues, and we're looking at methods and suggestions for implementation. And then, if I could, I just wanted to give an update on the work that myself and Ms. Franklin have been doing in regards to research for student representation for the board. It's not a committee, but with permission, I'd like to go ahead and just briefly share where we're at with that. Okay, so we've spoken with, we've gotten information from VBSA. We've went out and been at the citywide SCA. We've met with Dr. Spence and gotten feedback from his meetings with his different student groups. Out of our 7 cities in Hampton Roads, we are one of 3 that does not have a form of student representation to their school board. All the districts seem to be doing it a little differently, but kind of after looking at the information that we've received, we're kind of leaning towards a model of committee representation. It was expressed by the students, and we kind of concur that 1 or 2 students is not going to be enough to really be representative of our broad student body. We don't have the framework obviously worked out yet, but we are looking for a set number, a specified number of student representatives who would be meeting monthly or more than once a month, who would represent their schools, and then they could decide which representatives would come to a school board meeting if there's representatives within that group who have particular interests in our topics for that upcoming board meeting, et cetera. Looking at the idea of an application process and including juniors and seniors within that pool of representation. That way, each year there'll be the experienced members from that group, and there'll be new juniors coming in. And so kind of just looking for board input as we continue to explore what that process and membership might look like. Obviously, the student representatives would be non-voting members, but similar to our kind of discipline committees, where we have a non-voting member. They provide great insight to the board, and we certainly value that input. Moving forward, our plan would be to get back with the citywide SCA and discuss kind of a proposed process and organization for the applications and what's the magic number of students that would be involved. And then after getting some more set boundaries with that, asking PRC to draft a bylaw that we'd be able to put forth for information and eventually bring forward for a vote. We do anticipate it would be a multi-month process, but ultimately we may be able to get a bylaw and process approved by the end of this school year, maybe this spring, or hopefully no later than the beginning of next school year. So just kind of looking to see if the board is in general agreement with the process as it's moving forward, or if there's any concerns about those next steps. I'm not seeing any concerns. Obviously, if anybody has any additional thoughts or concerns, you can reach out to myself or Ms. Franklin. Thanks.
Ms. Weems?
Yes, yeah, I had a busy week last week. The Equity Council, as Ms. Owen said, and we're just really discussed kind of like the next steps, the implementation of this very comprehensive plan. Also, the Mental Health Task Force. The one big focus of that task force is going to be awareness when it comes to adult well-being for our employees. And really, first step, I think, is to just really let everybody know what we are doing and what the resources we do have and kind of a way to get there easily. One of the things that came up, which I thought was very interesting, in fact, I want to go to one of their meetings, is a student at Princess Anne High School has started the Student Athletes Mental and Emotional Alliance. And it's really going to be working with student activities and just really, looking at athletes and maybe some added stress that student athletes have. And so I thought that was very interesting. So I hope to be able to attend that. Also, Mental Health Task Force, we talked about the rapid response with the elementary students, that 2 clinicians from CHKD will be available upon need. So a lot of good stuff going on there. SEAC, Special Education Advisory Board, last night, was that? Yeah, Monday night. We had Dr. Brower to come and explain the hybrid schedule because a lot of parents had some questions, especially when it had to do with their children with special education services, how it kind of played in. So that was a very good presentation. Also, Ty Harris came with the equity plan, also and kind of explaining. And everybody was just so receptive about how much inclusion it was for students with disabilities. I've got so many notes here. Also, the CSEP is always there, and our regional CSEP Teacher of the Year, which includes all 7 regions, is actually from Virginia Beach, and it's Ms. Moore from Glenwood Elementary. So she got CSEP Teacher of the Year, and I think that's everything. Some goals of CSAC. This year are to collaborate with more school systems so that they can kind of have a regional voice, and also to really work through their transition committee and their inclusion committee for our kiddos. So very, very good week, very good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Franklin has her hand raised.
Okay. Ms. Franklin?
Hey, we had the Gifted CAC committee meeting since the last school board meeting, and we were lucky enough to have Kelly Arbel with the Talbot Academy World Languages Coordinator, and I just found it incredibly interesting. Obviously, Compass to 2025, it fits into all of the goals there, but basically she was just talking about the fact that 2 world languages is required in their academy, and doing a project. They're doing some international travel for some students to Madrid and Germany, and right now their project is global citizenship. And so one of the things that I found most interesting, though, was just the summer language opportunities that are available. So the Governor's World Language Academies in French, German, Spanish, Japanese, and Latin. And then although summer seems very far away right now, I don't think it's too early to start just talking about this, about the Star Talk Summer Academy. This year is the 14th year for BBCPS participation. And essentially this year they are going to be offering to rising 7th graders summer camps in Chinese, Russian, and Arabic for the first time this year. So anybody interested should definitely start reaching out and planning for those opportunities. But yeah, it was just a really interesting meeting we had, and I just thank her for attending our meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Franklin. Anybody else? Okay, a reminder to the public that we are in the process of vacating this building for approximately 7 months. And so our next school board meeting on December 13th will be held at the Holland Road Annex, which is 2323 Holland Road, corner of Nimmo Parkway and Holland Road, the old Kellam High School. And every meeting after that will be held there as well. As always, you can check our website for our agenda, and there will be reminder locations on that website. Or they can call Mrs. Tony Otto, our school board clerk. And with that, we have a closed session, so I will ask Mrs. Riggs to read us into closed. Yes, let me see. Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes, please.
I move that the school board recess into closed session in accordance with the exceptions to open meetings law set forth in Code of Virginia 2.2-3711 to deliberate on the following matters. 7, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body. For the purposes of this subdivision, probable litigation means litigation that has been specifically threatened or on which the public body or its legal counsel has a reasonable basis to believe will be commenced by or against a known party. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to permit the closure of a meeting merely because an attorney representing the public body is in attendance or is consulted on a matter. 8, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to permit the closure of a meeting merely because an attorney representing the public body is in attendance or is consulted on a matter, namely to discuss pending litigation matters. That was the motion. Do I have a second?
Okay, second, Ms. Hughes. So we are waiting
All in
for
favor?
a vote and for at this time, Mrs. Riggs, would you read us back into open session?
Whereas the school board of the city of Virginia Beach has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provision of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the school board of the city of Virginia Beach hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements of Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered.
That needs a motion.
Make the motion, so moved.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Manning, second, Ms. Owens. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We have 8 ayes. The motion passed.
Okay. And with that, thank you again to everyone who joined us in person and online. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. If you're traveling, travel safe. This meeting is adjourned.